Have you ever wondered what silence truly sounds like? Not the hush of a quiet room, not the stillness of night on Earth, but the kind of silence that wraps itself around the stars, that stretches endlessly between galaxies, where no wind ever whispers, and no footsteps fall. A silence so vast and gentle, it feels like being cradled by the universe itself. Let yourself settle in now, sink softly into your pillow. Relax your shoulders, let your hands rest where they are. There's nothing to do, nowhere to be, except here. Just breathe, feel your breath grow slower, deeper, as the world around you dims. With every breath, imagine yourself floating a little farther from the busy sounds of life, drifting into a quiet made not of absence, but of presence, the presence of space, infinite, calm, timeless. And now, let our journey begin, beyond the world we know, past the pale blue shimmer of Earth and the bright curve of the moon. A small vessel glides silently through the stars. It moves slowly, not from caution, but from peace. There is no rush here. Time stretches long and smooth in the great canvas of space. Inside the vessel, the lights are soft and amber-toned, glowing like distant suns. The cabin hums gently, a lullaby of quiet machinery, like the purring of a cat on a windowsill. Everything here has been designed for stillness. No sharp sounds, no sudden movements, just a cocoon of warmth and air drifting steadily through the cosmic deep. Outside the window, the universe unfolds like an ancient painting, a vast and endless tapestry of stars, each one flickering gently in its own rhythm. Some are cool and blue, whispering of youth. Others burn orange or red, slower, older, wiser somehow. Their light travels for thousands, millions of years just to greet you here, now, in this quiet moment. As you watch, a cluster of stardust trails by, like glitter floating in water. It swirls in slow spirals, catching the light like powdered glass, drifting in patterns too perfect to be random, too delicate to describe. They move without hurry, like dancers performing for no one but themselves. Your ship's path is guided, not by engines or force, but by gravity's gentle pull, a cosmic current flowing through the galaxy. It nudges you softly along invisible paths, woven by starlight and the whispers of ancient sun. You pass the edge of a nebula now, a soft, luminous cloud of gas and dust, glowing from within. It is the color of dreams, lavender and peach, pale aquamarine and honey gold. It swells like a tide, folding in on itself, pulsing with the slow heartbeat of creation. Somewhere deep within it, new stars are being born. But there is no sound, no spectacle, just the slow, sacred work of the universe breathing life into itself. Closer still, the ship's sensors glow faintly, registering the presence of gentle energy. It's not dangerous, it's more like warmth on your skin on a cool morning, an echo of stars forming, of gases coming together in a hush of gravity and time. You feel the shift in the air around you, as if the ship itself is humming in contentment. You close your eyes for a moment. Even with them shut, you can see the glow of the nebula, soft and golden, like sunlight through closed eyelids. The hum of the ship becomes a part of your own rhythm, the beat of your heart, the rise and fall of your breath. Minutes pass like hours, or maybe hours like minutes. It's hard to tell. Time becomes syrupy, slow and sweet, stretching like honey in warm tea. You aren't in a hurry. You're part of something older, vaster, more serene than anything you've ever known. Out beyond the ship's curve, a distant planet becomes visible. Just a faint circle at first, then gradually forming into a pale lilac sphere with rings that gleam silver and ice blue. They aren't thick like Saturn's, no. These are finer, more delicate, like threads spun from frost. They spiral in slow, endless arcs, and as the ship approaches, you can see them catch the light of a nearby sun. There's something about the way they turn, effortless, weightless, like the breath of a sleeping child. You pass through them slowly, the ship drifting among particles no larger than grains of sand, each one glinting like a tiny jewel. Outside it is utterly silent, but inside a soft chime sounds whenever one of the ice crystals brushes against the hull. Not harsh, not even startling, just a soft, delicate ting like wind chimes far off on a breeze. You listen, and your mind quiets even further. Each chime is like a star saying hello, or perhaps it's the universe saying you are safe here. As the rings fall away behind you, the planet's glow fades into the distance, and ahead, the dark opens once more. But it isn't empty. Darkness in space is never truly dark. It is filled with secrets, with wonders that wait to be seen. Ahead, the stars begin to thicken, gathering in clusters and spirals like scattered pearls. You're approaching a star nursery, where suns are born from drifting gas and magnetic fields, but not with fire and thunder. No, not here. Here, stars begin with warmth, with the slow curl of energy wrapping into itself, pulling dust like a blanket, shaping spheres of soft light. You float past one that is just beginning to glow, its center warm and flickering. Not quite bright yet. It spins lazily, like a lantern turning in still air. You drift closer to the edge of this stellar nursery, and the ship adjusts its orientation automatically, like a bird banking toward a thermal. No force, no sound, just a tilt gentle and sure, following the flow of invisible forces, older than light. The view outside widens. You can now see the spiral arms of a distant galaxy turning like slow whirlpools. It is so far away it seems still, but you know it spins, each arm filled with billions of stars moving in harmony. You imagine what it would sound like if you could hear it, not with ears, but with the part of you that listens to silence. A sound not of notes but of feeling, a low, soft hum like a deep chord, held beneath a lullaby. Your breath matches that hum, your thoughts slow further still. And in this moment, you feel it. The vast, loving quiet of the cosmos, holding you like a cradle. There is no weight here, no worry, no rush, only the drift, the soft, infinite drift through a sky without end. Far from the nurseries of stars and the whispering rings of distant planets, your ship glides onward, deeper into the heart of the galaxy. It travels not by maps but by intention. A soft, silent course set long ago, meant only for wandering, only for wonder. Within your vessel, the atmosphere remains serene. The walls curve gently, organic and smooth, almost like the inside of a seashell. The lighting shifts slowly with the passing hours, imitating the hues of stars beyond. There is no ticking clock, no blinking alarm, no sharp reminder of time, only a soft rhythm of light and shadow, keeping pace with your breath. You drift now through a region known among navigators and dreamers as the Wandering Vale, a great stretch of open space where ancient stars float alone, far from the crowded spiral arms. Here, each sun moves at its own pace, not bound by the dance of constellations or the bustling traffic of interstellar lanes. The silence here is profound, not empty, just full of peace. Each star in the veil is unique. Some are giants, enormous and cool, glowing a rich crimson like embers beneath ash. Others are tiny and bright white, sharp as diamonds, holding tightly to their warmth in quiet defiance of the cold. They are wanderers, these stars. Some have no planets, no moons, no belts of dust. They shine purely for themselves, and for any who happen to pass close enough to notice. Your vessel slows as it nears one such sun, a golden star with a faint halo of mist around it. From a distance, it looks like a lantern surrounded by morning fog. But as you draw closer, you see that the mist is made of countless tiny particles, dust and ice and memory drifting in an elegant arc around the star. You coast quietly through the halo, the hull of your ship shimmering with every grain that brushes its side. The ship is silent, but you can feel the contact, a delicate, tingling sensation that hums faintly beneath your fingertips as if the dust itself is whispering old stories. And perhaps it is. This dust is ancient, older than Earth, older than many stars. It once belonged to a shattered world or the remnants of a star long gone. It floats now in tribute, turning endlessly in the sunlight of this golden wanderer. The star itself looms larger now, though still distant. You won't pass too close. The warmth, while gentle, is not meant to be touched. But from here you can bask in it, like sitting by a fire on a cold winter night. The star flickers slightly, a subtle pulse every few minutes. It's not a fault, it's breathing. Yes, that's the feeling you get. This star breathes. Inhale, light expands. Exhale, it dims ever so slightly. You watch, mesmerized. You've been here only moments, but already you feel a connection, as though this solitary sun has welcomed your presence, grateful for the quiet company. Time slows even more. Your thoughts begin to wander, not in restless loops, but like clouds drifting across a clear sky. You wonder where this star has been, how far it has traveled through the galaxy, whether it had companions once, perhaps planets with oceans, or moons that rang with ice storms. But now it is alone, and yet it doesn't feel lonely. It feels whole, complete, content to shine in its own space, to light the dust around it, to pulse gently like a heart sleeping soundly. You remain there for a while, minutes, hours, you're not sure. The ship turns slowly, giving you different angles of the surrounding veil. The colors shift subtly. In one direction, the dust glows like amber and copper. In another, it shimmers silver and pearl. Finally, the ship resumes its soft drift, easing away from the star and back into the greater quiet. The golden light fades behind you, swallowed gradually by the black velvet of space. But it leaves a warmth inside you, like the afterglow of a kind smile. Ahead, a new sight begins to appear. At first, it's just a flicker, a pale blue shimmer like moonlight caught in water. Then, as you approach, the shimmer spreads into a wide circular field of color. It's not a planet, not a moon. It is what astronomers call a reflection cloud, a vast, nearly invisible field of gas and fine crystals, lit only when starlight touches it, just right. And tonight your path cuts through it like a slow dance. The light catches the particles at an angle that turns them into diamonds, scattered loosely in a sea of darkness. The stars beyond are dimmed by the haze, but not erased. Their light is softened, diffused, as if you are looking through frosted glass. Every motion of your ship stirs the particles around it, creating gentle spirals and wakes that slowly trail behind you. You feel like you're floating through a dream. There is no sound, no pressure, no gravity beyond the artificial warmth of your ship. You're weightless, suspended. Here, the world feels distant. The noise, the bustle, the ticking seconds of ordinary life, they've all melted into the background. All that exists now is the soft blue veil, the way it shifts like a sleeping creature around you, and the whisper of starlight filtering through. In the corner of the observation window, a long curling tail of ice reflects a dozen shades of blue and violet. It belongs to a passing comet, an old traveler like you. The ship slows slightly to let it pass. You watch it trail by, slow and serene, its icy core glowing faintly at the center of its ethereal wake. You could reach out and almost touch it. Almost. but instead you let it glide. Comets like this have been drifting through the galaxy for eons, painting slow arcs around stars, waiting centuries, just to visit the inner systems before swinging out into the dark again. Their journeys are patient. Like yours, you drift onward once more. Through the thinning veil of crystal mist, a new shape appears in the distance, round and silver gray. A moon perhaps, though its orbit is uncertain. It seems to move on its own, slowly rotating like a sculpture in space. As you draw closer, you see that the surface of this moon is not smooth. It's covered in great sweeping ridges, like dunes frozen in stone. Craters, yes, but not violent. Weathered, ancient, a place shaped by time, not trauma. The ship settles into a slow orbit. Outside, the moon's horizon glows faintly, lit by a hidden star. A faint haze outlines its curves, a soft halo, like breath on glass. You watch as shadow and light slide across its surface, tracing patterns that never quite repeat. There are valleys here, wide and low, carved by something long gone, and frozen lakes that gleam under starlight, holding the memory of water. No signs of life, no signals, but there's a sense of peace so complete it feels almost sacred. You close your eyes again. The hum of the ship becomes your blanket. You breathe in and out. You feel yourself drifting, not just through space now, but through a kind of timelessness, a place where past and future have folded into the present, where all that matters is the calm between stars. And just before sleep begins to pull you deeper, the ship's sensors note one final sight for this passage. A soft pulse, far ahead, faint and distant. A blue-white star just rising over the horizon of interstellar night. You will go there soon, but not yet. For now you rest, and space holds you gently in its arms. The vessel continues its gentle passage, a single thread weaving through the great loom of stars. Outside, the darkness is endless, but never empty. It is a living canvas, breathing, glowing, shifting ever so subtly with light and silent sea. As you rest within the soft cocoon of your ship, the ambient lights dim further, matching the quiet rhythm of your heartbeat. Every surface hums with warmth, not from heat, but from presence, from care. The ship is your companion now, silent and patient, its sole purpose to carry you gently through this endless pee. You begin to stir, not from sleep exactly, but from a deeper stillness, a restful dream within a dream. The view screen slowly brightens to reveal a new sight beyond the curve of your window. The stars here have changed. They are closer now, grouped together in quiet companionship. You've entered a region known to a few deep space navigators as the Garden of Slow Suns. It is not a garden in the way Earth once knew gardens. There are no trees, no flowers, no birdsong or breeze, and yet it carries the same feeling. An impression of careful arrangement, of still beauty, of space held sacred. Here, the stars are older. They burn with a steadier light, their colors deeper, more mellow, amber, rose gold, pale saffron. Each one pulses slowly, a steady glow that does not flicker. They are closer to the ends of their lives, but they do not rush. They shine with dignity, with calm. As the ship glides deeper into the garden, the density of light begins to change. It's not brighter, not overwhelming, but fuller, more layered, like walking into a quiet room, filled with soft candlelight. The ship turns slightly, and a structure begins to form against the backdrop of stars. It isn't man-made. Nothing here is, but nature in its cosmic vastness sometimes creates formations that feel intentional. What you see now is a cluster of stars, arranged in a perfect arc, like a crescent made of firefly. Between them, faint trails of gas stretch like silk scarves in slow motion. You drift toward the arc, and as you pass beneath it, a shimmering field becomes visible. A kind of starlit mist stretches between the suns, a plasma veil only visible when lit just right. It glows with soft hues, dusky mauve, faded rose, champagne gold. Colors you can't quite name, only feel. The stars here are slow indeed. Their orbits are languid, their flares soft and rhythmic. You get the sense that they are in conversation with one another. Not in words, but in the exchange of gravity and light. A conversation so ancient, it's more like memory than speech. As you coast deeper into the garden, the ship slows itself to almost a drift. The sensors detect no hazards, no disruptions. The way ahead is open, calm, still. You notice something unusual now. Planets, not many, but a few. Each one orbits its own quiet sun. And though they are far apart, their paths are stable, peaceful. The first planet you pass is large, draped in thick clouds that reflect its sun's amber light in soft golden hues. The clouds move like oil in water, slow and swirling, never break. Occasionally, a flash of white lightning perhaps flutters deep within the folds of vapor, like the blink of a dreaming eye. There is no sign of life, no cities or signals, but it feels alive, in its own way, breathing slowly through its storms, holding its silence like a secret. The second planet is different. Small, icy, with a smooth, pale surface that reflects starlight like a mirror. You glide close enough to see gentle ridges carved by wind. Long since stilled, the planet turns so slowly that its day stretches across weeks. On one side, the starlight glows softly across frozen plains. On the other, darkness lays like velvet over mountain ridges, touched only by the faint light of distant suns. The horizon gleams faintly where the two meet, a line of twilight frozen in place. The ship coasts along that twilight line. And for a moment, everything is still. You feel suspended between time zones, between past and future. No day, no night, just quiet, just now. And then, as the ship continues its slow arc, the third world appears, and this one takes your breath. Not from shock, but from awe. It is a ringed world, smaller than the first, but vibrant with color. Its surface is covered in wide, shallow oceans tinted a deep violet, with long chains of islands like green threads sewn into fabric. Its rings are pale gold, scattered with ice, and they catch the light of its old star with a subdued shimmer. The most surprising thing, though, is its stillness. You expect movement, waves, wind, clouds, but everything is still. The ocean lies flat as glass. The islands show no signs of disturbance. No trees bend, no clouds pass. It is like a memory held in place, as if the planet is paused mid-breath, preserving a perfect moment of peace. You do not land. This is not a place to claim, only to witness. The ship passes slowly above one of the wider oceans, and through the surface of the water you glimpse pale shapes beneath. Long ridges of coral-like formations, glimmering faintly like submerged stars. Nothing moves, and yet you sense presence, not watching, not judging, just being. There are places in the universe where nature becomes more than itself, where silence becomes a language. This is one of those places. You linger in orbit for a time. The ship's lights dim further. Your body relaxes again. Shoulders loose, jaw soft, fingers resting gently on your lap. You lean back, exhaling a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding. And then movement, not outside but within the display. The navigation map pulses gently. A path opens ahead. It isn't a directive. It's an invitation, a corridor of light, made from the faint alignments of the garden's stars, stretches ahead like a softly glowing tunnel. It's not truly visible, not in any material way, but the sensors trace its shape, and your eyes begin to catch it too. A shimmer, a suggestion of form. You follow it. The ship begins to turn, not sharply, never sharply, but with the ease of a feather turning in wind. The starlight along the corridor brightens just slightly, and the ship glides into it like a boat coasting into a gentle stream. And then there is only flow, no propulsion, no correction, just drift. The corridor carries you deeper between stars. The starlight pulses gently on either side. Amber rose, silver, copper. You pass slowly between them. A traveler cradled in light. It's a passage of grace, of gratitude. It's as if the stars themselves are guiding you through this sacred space. Eventually, the corridor begins to widen. The density of stars lessens, and the darkness deepens once more. But it is not empty. Ahead, a single star waits, pale blue, sharp and pure, pulsing softly like a heartbeat in a distant dream. That is where you are going next, but not yet. For now, the Garden of Slow Suns still holds you in its quiet, and in this gentle hold, your breath grows deeper again. You settle into silence, lulled by the stars' slow hum, and the cosmos, ever patient, waits for your next. The Garden of Slow Suns gently fades behind as your vessel slips into the narrowing distance of starlight, drifting with the ease of a leaf on a tranquil stream. The corridor of light that had cradled your passage dissolves gradually, its silken shimmer thinning into nothingness until only the soft blue glow ahead remains. That single waiting star grows slowly larger as you approach, its light not sharp or commanding, but steady, calm in a way that feels deliberate, like the presence of an old soul who speaks with silence. This is no ordinary star. Its color is something between frost and flame, its surface cool by stellar standards, but still radiant enough to cast gentle hues across the dark. The ship draws nearer, and the view outside begins to shift into a world of blue-white reflections, soft halos and elongated shadows. The star's light is stronger here, not oppressive, but vivid, like moonlight layered 1,000-fold. It floods the space around you, painting your cabin in pale silver, touching the quiet walls with a glow that feels like a quiet blessing. Around the star you begin to see them debris fields at first, but not chaotic. These aren't the jagged remains of broken worlds or scattered fragments of collisions. They're delicate, graceful ribbons of crystalline material drifting in concentric rings far beyond the star's surface. Some of them shimmer with rainbow sheen, while others remain translucent, their forms barely visible except where they intersect the light. The ship begins to slow again, not because of resistance, but as if in reverence. There's a stillness here, unlike anything you've passed through before, as though the space itself holds its breath. The navigation display quietly reveals the name designated not by humans, but translated from the signal signatures of an old probe that wandered here centuries ago. The Wake of the Blue Star. You feel the name settle into your mind like a lullaby. The ship coasts into the edge of the star's influence, where gravity is gentle and the rings are more distinct. One of the crystalline streams begins to curve slowly into view, and as the vessel aligns with its path, you realize that this is more than dust or ice. Each shard within the ribbon sparkles as though faceted, like tiny pieces of frozen time. They move slowly, some turning ever so slightly, reflecting the star's light in glimmers that dance across your ship's surface. You watch them pass, hypnotized, each one twirling in its own rhythm, some solitary, others seeming to drift in clusters like flocks of glimmering birds suspended in zero gravity. They emit no sound, but something deep within you imagines a faint hum, a chorus of glass bells on the edge of hearing, each one gently resonating in the silence. It's a sound that's more feeling than vibration, and you listen with your whole being. The ship follows the curve of the ribbon for a while, tracing its lazy spiral as it arcs outward from the star. You are surrounded by drifting light, as if you're floating through the tail of a comet made from moonlight and dreams. Slowly, the pattern of the stream begins to shift. The crystals become larger, spaced farther apart, their surfaces smoother. Some are the size of grains of sand, others stretch as long as trees. You see one now, spinning with slow elegance, Just outside the window, a flat hexagonal plate, clear as glass, with veins of opalescent color running through its center. It looks like it might sing if touched, like it might hold a single note forever. The ship's soft hum adjusts, matching your course with that of the ribbon's outer layers. You begin to pass over a field where the crystals are arranged in spiral constellations. Naturally or by ancient design, you cannot tell. They feel intentional, like something left behind by a gentle intelligence, not meant to be found, only to exist, only to be seen by those who wander slowly enough. The field gives way to open space once more, and you find yourself gazing into a patch of darkness so smooth, it feels like velvet drawn tight across a window. But there is no emptiness here. Slowly, as your eyes adjust, you begin to make out faint points of light within the dark, tiny, precise, evenly spaced stars. Yes, but dimmer than any you've seen, hidden perhaps by the shadow of the blue star's light. You realize now that you're passing through what is sometimes called a star shadow, a region where a massive star's light washes out everything else, like sunlight blotting out the stars during day. But here, in this narrow band between light and deep space, you can see what lies behind it, and it's breathtaking. A delicate spread of background galaxies stretches across your view like a field of frost, tiny spirals, faint ellipses, clusters of faraway stars. You're seeing millions of suns gathered into distant cities of light, each one suspended like dust in a shaft of sunbeam. Their light has traveled for ages, longer than Earth has existed, and yet here it arrives, now quietly brushing your window. You sit still, feeling the weightless drift of time and distance around you. Your breath is slow, and your body feels distant, as if you too are part of the stars outside, a glowing point of calm in the midst of all this moving light. In this moment, nothing needs doing. Nothing needs solving. There is no urgency, only presence. The ship continues forward, leaving the outer rim of the crystal fields behind. The blue star begins to shrink in the rear view, becoming a pale flame once more. Ahead, another structure emerges, not a planet, not a moon, but something vast and diffuse. It appears first as a faint glow, then expands into view, a spherical cloud, softly lit from within, drifting slowly through space like a lantern suspended in water. It is a ghost cloud, the remnant of a long-dead star, its final exhalation frozen in space. But it is not somber. It glows with serenity. Its gases move in slow curls and swells, like ink spreading in calm water, forming shifting patterns that loop and fade. The ship slows again as you approach its edge, letting you drift through the outer layers of mist. The light changes around you, becoming diffused, dreamy. Shapes move through the fog, some sharp-edged, some curling, all soft with distance. The colors are gentle lavender, ash blue, faint rose, silver-touched gray. As you pass through the cloud, the outside world becomes a haze, the stars fading to pale specks. It feels like being inside a dream, wrapped in layers of quiet thought. Somewhere within, you see long tendrils of light, like delicate roots glowing from within, arcing gently across the dark. They do not move quickly. Nothing here does. Every motion is measured, elegant, slow, a ballet of vapor and time. The cloud begins to thin eventually, the edges tapering off into space. The stars come into view once more, sharper now, like pinpricks through silk. You emerge on the far side and the ship pivots slowly to offer one last view of the ghost cloud. It hovers behind you like a drifting memory, glowing softly in the dark, a farewell gesture from a place that never knew your name, but welcomed you nonetheless. Ahead, space opens wide once more, but in the distance, far beyond the scattered stars, you glimpse something new. a long silver arc curving like a path across the black. It could be a nebula, or something stranger, something older. Your course bends toward it gently, but you have time. The stars are in no hurry. Neither are you. You breathe in and out, and let the universe carry you forward, wrapped in its silence, held in its light. The stars fade gently behind as your vessel continues along its effortless path through the cosmos. Drawn forward not by force, but by something far subtler, the invisible thread of curiosity and calm, woven through the fabric of space itself. Ahead, the vast arc you glimpsed before begins to take shape, no longer a vague shimmer on the horizon of the void, but a distinct curve stretching across the blackness like a soft silver brushstroke on velvet. It is wide, gently sloping, luminous, not with brilliance, but with reflection. The ship's sensors respond silently, scanning, measuring, not in alarm but in quiet intrigue. You don't feel a shift in course. The ship is already aligned with the arc, as though it had always meant to bring you here. And perhaps it had. Perhaps everything in this voyage has followed a path more ancient than time. Not designed or forced, but simply discovered through stillness. As you approach, the arc reveals its texture. Not a solid structure, but a ribbon of particulate matter. Dust, crystal, tiny shards of silicate and carbon, all suspended across a gentle wave of gravity stretching light years long. It's known to astronomers, those few who have ever glimpsed it, as the Arc of Elisari, a name passed down from exploratory scans and quiet speculations. No one has mapped it fully. It drifts beyond navigational routes, away from trade lanes and colonized worlds. It exists like a secret whispered by the galaxy, meant only for those who take the long way, who move slowly, who listen. The light of distant stars bends through it, not sharply, but like sunlight through sheer curtains. As your vessel crosses the boundary, the entire world around you softens. Shadows blur, edges lose their sharpness. You are drifting through something almost dreamlike. Neither cloud nor storm, neither nebula nor ring, just a tranquil path of suspended glitter, faintly humming with memory. The ship begins to follow the arc's inner bend, floating along the stream as one might float down a river at twilight. Outside, the scattered matter catches every flicker of starlight, transforming the space around you into a vast ocean of shimmer and motion. The particles move not in chaos, but in slow harmonies, currents, tides, eddies that form and drift without end. Some twist into spirals, others bloom outward like the petals of translucent flower. Occasionally, a larger form drifts into view, a fragment of crystalline ice, the size of a mountain, or a smooth slab of stone etched with age. One in particular floats close to your vessel's starboard side, a pale disk, rotating gently, its surface covered in fractal patterns of frost. For a moment, it mirrors the shape of your ship, as though it too is a vessel drifting through a sea of stars following the same current. It passes silently, unhurried, disappearing into the haze like a thought dissolving back into sleep. Deeper into the arc now, the stars beyond begin to fade behind the soft luminescence, replaced by internal reflection. It's as if you are inside a living pearl, the walls glowing softly from within, responding to your presence with a kind of calm awareness. There is no sound, no tremor, just the soft, consistent hum of your ship and the constant, patient drift. You feel time melt here, not lost, not confused, simply irrelevant. The minutes stretch, not from boredom, but from fullness. Each moment is so rich with softness and space that it doesn't need to move. You are held here, not trapped, but cradled. Eventually, the arc thickens, and your sensors pick up signs of subtle gravitational interplay. Something lies ahead, massive, but not dense, a shape forming in the core of the arc, shrouded in mist and dust, drawing particles into a gentle orbit. As you approach, its form becomes clearer, Not a planet, not a star, but something stranger. A hollow sphere, vast and slow turning, composed entirely of reflective fragments, debris from a long-lost moon perhaps, or the remains of some ancient artificial structure now swallowed by the ark's passage. The fragments are suspended by delicate gravitational tension, forming a lacework shell that rotates like an enormous mobile. Light bounces within it, creating internal rainbows that flicker and fade across the ship's hull. You drift nearer, and for a brief stretch of timelessness, you are inside the sphere, your ship passing through its hollow core, surrounded on all sides by 1,000 glittering pieces, slowly orbiting a center that holds nothing but space. It's quiet here, so quiet that you can hear your own breath. You close your eyes and feel the rhythm of the spin, so slow it becomes a lullaby. The fragments drift past without urgency. Their presence is not intrusive. It feels like being inside a memory, one that doesn't belong to you but welcomes you all the same. When the ship exits the far side of the sphere, you find that the arc itself has changed. It narrows now, its band of matter pulling tighter into a more defined path, and the light begins to grow dimmer, not dark, just gentler. The glitter fades into a softer glow, as though the arc is leading you from light into shade, from movement into rest. You follow it without resistance. The vessel requires no command. It simply moves with the current, trusting the stillness. You pass through a region where the matter becomes fine as powder, diffused like the trail of a comet long since passed. And then slowly, you begin to emerge from the arc. The ribbon tapers behind you, thinning until it vanishes into the great black sea once more. The stars return, first one, then dozens, then thousands, piercing the dark like tiny campfires far, far away. Ahead, a new sight opens, a rare phenomenon, a stellar lake. Not truly a lake, not in the sense of water or land, but a massive region of space, where dust, ionized gas, and gentle radiation combine to form a basin of soft, consistent light. It stretches out in all directions, a glowing field of gold and gray, dotted with islands of denser material, clouds shaped like stones dropped in still water. The field is smooth, still, peaceful. Your ship enters the lake's outer edge, and at once the motion ceases. You are not pulled, you are not pushed, you float, suspended in this golden sea. The view outside becomes more abstract now, not stars and dust and orbiting masses, but color and shape and tone. Light spreads in waves, forming rings around the ship, responding gently to its presence. It's like drifting through the reflection of a sunrise caught on the surface of a lake at dawn. Some of the islands within the field are close enough to study. One resembles a spiral, its curls almost perfectly symmetrical, a natural sculpture formed by the slow motion of light over time. Another pulses faintly from within, emitting tiny sparks of energy that form ephemeral patterns in the air around it. These aren't stars, they're not planets, they're echoes, remnants of events so old they've lost their form and become present. You drift among them, feeling more like a part of the scene than an observer. Your body is light, your breath even, your thoughts distant and soft. Time here is not measured in seconds or minutes. It is measured in stillness, in how long you can remain aware of the silence without needing to change it. The ship adjusts its orientation slowly, turning to face one of the more distant clouds. As it does, the cabin lights dim again, letting the outside world take over. And for a while, there is nothing but light and space and calm. No thoughts, no plans, just the drift, just the hush. You are further now than almost anyone has ever traveled, and yet there is no loneliness, only the deep, patient company of the cosmos, wrapping you in layers of quiet and light, holding you like a song. There is no edge to this moment, no beginning to the quiet that now surrounds your vessel. Only a gentle continuation, a seamless gliding from one layer of stillness into the next. As you remain cocooned within the calm interior of the ship, The windows show nothing urgent, nothing demanding attention, just the unfurling elegance of the cosmos, spreading slowly before you like the surface of a great celestial sea. The stellar lake lies behind you now, a golden hush receding into the distance, and ahead emerges something even more profound. A luminous expanse stretching farther than the eye can follow. Not a nebula, not a cloud, but a shimmering region of light and plasma suspended within the deep galactic void. The sensors do not know what to name it, and in truth, names feel unnecessary here. This place resists definition. It is not hostile nor strange, only vast, only open, only still. The light it emits is soft and uniform, not from stars but from the slow dance of energy flowing freely through space, casting everything in a glow of pale white and faint rose, as though the entire region has been dusted with the memory of dawn. The vessel slows to a near hover as it crosses into this quiet region, not from resistance, but from reverence, as though some subconscious protocol has awakened, gently instructing the ship to drift with heightened softness. Outside, the light moves in waves that are barely perceptible, like the shifting pattern of wind over tall grass. Occasionally, a pulse of deeper color passes through the field, a slow swell of lavender, or a gentle roll of deep gray-blue vanishing, as gradually as it came, not unlike the echo of a sigh through an empty chamber. It's unclear what causes these changes in hue or movement. Perhaps it is gravity, perhaps magnetism, or perhaps it is simply the place itself breathing in its own rhythm, exhaling thoughts that stretch thousands of kilometers wide and take hours to form a single curve. Within the heart of the expanse, you begin to notice small pockets of quiet density, clusters of gently rotating gas that form ephemeral rings and loops, some of them shaped like petals, others like mirrored spirals, always moving but never hurried. One such loop turns slowly beneath your ship now, wide and shallow, its center holding a small pool of blue plasma that flickers like candlelight beneath still water. The ship floats gently above it, the light below casting smooth ripples of color across the hull, touching the window frames, reflecting faintly onto your face. You sit in stillness, your breath matching the motion of the lights, your body responding not with thought but with sensation. The calm thrum in your chest, the softness in your limbs, the warmth in your fingertips. Around you, time dilates once more, slipping into a pace so slow it becomes indistinguishable from stillness. You begin to feel as if you are no longer inside the ship at all, but inside the light itself, nestled within the folds of this glowing silence. There is a serenity here that defies comprehension, not just the absence of noise or motion, but the presence of peace, so complete it becomes its own kind of awareness. You pass another structure now, if it can be called that, floating like a suspended sculpture at the edge of the expanse. It appears at first to be a natural formation, an arc of dense matter shaped into a crescent, but the longer you observe it, the more deliberate it seems. Its curve is too precise, its surface too smooth, its placement too poised. It does not emit a signal, it does not spin. It's simply, perhaps a remnant of something old, a shell left behind by a civilization that understood silence more deeply than we do. Or perhaps it formed on its own, given shape by time, gravity and stillness. You pass beneath it slowly, close enough to see that its surface is etched with minute regular patterns, grooves and notches that curve along its length, not chaotic, but structured, like the notes of a language written by starlight. The light of the expanse brushes over it, casting faint shadows along the grooves, hinting at messages unreadable but deeply felt. You don't need to understand them, you only need to witness them. And so you drift by, your presence acknowledged not with movement or change, but simply with continued calm. Farther into the luminous sea, the density of light begins to shift again. The gentle pulses of color slow even further. The flickers of motion stretch across wider distances, until you begin to feel as though you are moving through the inside of a sleeping thought. It is quiet, not empty. It is full, not crowded. There is space here for everything. For wonder, for breath, for peace. The ship continues to glide forward, now approaching what looks like the heart of the expanse. A central bloom of light, brighter but no less soft, where the slow waves of color converge into a sphere of gentle luminescence. It is not a star. It has no gravity well, no corona, no heat, but it radiates presence. As you approach, the ship slows once more, and the interior lights dim to allow the bloom outside to fully illuminate the space within. You float silently toward the edge of this glowing center, and in that moment, everything else falls away. No memory, no future, only the now, only the pulse of quiet light brushing gently against your window, as though the universe itself has leaned close to say, "Be still, just be." Time pauses here. Your breath becomes the only sound. You sit in its glow, and you do not think. You do not move. You simply feel. And what you feel is belonging not to a place or a purpose, but to the silence itself. After what could be an hour or a lifetime, the ship begins to shift again, turning gently, lifting its nose to follow a newly forming thread of dim light that seems to stretch from the edge of the expanse into deeper space. The bloom recedes slowly behind you, not fading, just growing more distant, until it is once more part of the backdrop. A quiet memory suspended in the wide, unfolding dark. Ahead lies the continuation of the journey. Stars so far away they appear as a faint fog of white, trails of pale light drawn like brushstrokes across the black canvas of the universe. But you feel no need to rush, no need to leave anything behind. You carry the light of the expanse with you now, not in the ship's sensors, but in your breath, in your calm, in the quiet rhythm of your heart that now beats to the music of stillness. And so, onward you drift, slow, serene. The luminous expanse fades gently behind as your vessel follows the quiet thread of silver light that arcs onward through the dark, subtle as breath, barely perceptible in the vast velvet canvas of the galaxy. It stretches like a trail of moonlight spilled across calm water, soft and diffuse, not pulling or pushing but simply existing. A path not laid out by design but discovered in stillness. And your ship responds to it as though it always knew this was the way forward, gliding effortlessly through the deep without resistance. Its gentle hum barely louder than the sound of your own breath. Outside the windows, the stars are sparse for a while, scattered like single notes on a page of quiet music, each one distant and alone but never isolated. Their light slow and steady, flickering only as the ship's subtle course curves along the thread. And soon the emptiness begins to change, so softly at first that you barely notice, until the black begins to take on depth. Not color but texture, like layers of shadow rippling across one another like silk beneath flowing water. This is a place where light bends not just around gravity but through history, where the remnants of long-past stellar winds drift still, creating rivers and eddies of fine, nearly invisible matter that shimmers faintly when struck by the light of stars long since extinguished. The sensors register it as low-level interference, but it is not chaotic or sharp. It's slow, beautiful, almost meditative. The drifting threads of the pale tides, a phenomenon seldom seen and rarely entered, for it moves and reshapes itself across millennia, flowing like a suspended ocean between the spiral arms of the galaxy. Too quiet to chart, too calm to draw attention from those who rush. But you are not rushing, you are gliding, suspended, welcomed. The pale tides are composed of dust finer than frost, gases cool and sparse, and tiny magnetic pulses that pulse not in patterns but in a kind of ambient, natural rhythm. And the ship begins to drift with them, aligning its slow orbit with one of the broader waves that rises and falls across light years. The result of forgotten collisions or invisible gravities stretching this ancient cosmic sea into soft, undulating folds of time and silence. The interior lighting of the ship dims once more, mimicking the cool blue-gray glow that now filters in through the main viewport, and the effect is soothing, like moonlight through fog, a constant faint shimmer that seems to soften even your thoughts. And as you settle deeper into the seat, wrapped in warmth and silence, the world inside and the world outside blur into one single current, your breath becoming the tide, your heart the slow rhythm of this boundless drift. Occasionally, shapes emerge in the haze, larger formations that could be old debris or natural satellites, sculpted by time and exposure, their surfaces smooth and cratered, some drifting alone, others trailing long, ghostly wakes of dust that curve away into the dark like soft fabric trailing behind a dancer. One such form rotates slowly nearby, an oval-shaped mass of stone and metal pitted with its surface covered in faint iridescence, where layers of minerals have reacted over countless centuries with solar wind and stardust. And as the ship passes close, you can almost imagine it breathing, not with life, but with memory, with the slow patience of matter that has existed far longer than any voice that might name it. You watch it turn, each rotation taking minutes, and as you do, another shape becomes visible far beyond it. A vast spiral of drifting gas, not unlike a galaxy but smaller, more personal, as though some ancient celestial current spun itself briefly into a pattern of slow dance, before relaxing back into the open dark. And the ship adjusts course to coast through one of its outer arms. The gas here is faintly luminous, tinged with hints of rose and violet, swirling in slow motion as if stirred by invisible fingers. And as you pass through it, light patterns ripple across the windows, stretching and folding like reflections on moving water. The luminous expanse fades gently behind as your vessel follows the quiet thread of silver light that arcs onward through the dark, subtle as breath, barely perceptible in the vast velvet canvas of the galaxy. It stretches like a trail of moonlight spilled across calm water, soft and diffuse, not pulling or pushing but simply existing, a path not laid out by design but discovered in stillness. And your ship responds to it as though it always knew this was the way forward, gliding effortlessly through the deep without resistance, its gentle hum barely louder than the sound of your own breath. Outside the windows, the stars are sparse for a while, scattered like single notes on a page of quiet music, each one distant and alone but never isolated, their light slow and steady, flickering only as the ship's subtle course curves along the thread. And soon the emptiness begins to change, so softly at first that you barely notice, until the black begins to take on depth, not color but texture, like layers of shadow rippling across one another, like silk beneath flowing water. This is a place where light bends not just around gravity but through history, where the remnants of long-past stellar winds drift still, creating rivers and eddies of fine, nearly invisible matter that shimmers faintly when struck by the light of stars long since extinguished. The sensors register it as low-level interference, but it is not chaotic or sharp. It's slow, beautiful, almost meditative, the drifting threads of the pale tides, a phenomenon seldom seen and rarely entered, for it moves and reshapes itself across millennia, flowing like a suspended ocean between the spiral arms of the galaxy, too quiet to chart, too calm to draw attention from those who rush. But you are not rushing. You are gliding, suspended, welcome. The pale tides are composed of dust finer than frost, gases cool and sparse, and tiny magnetic pulses that pulse not in patterns but in a kind of ambient, natural rhythm. And the ship begins to drift with them, aligning its slow orbit with one of the broader waves that rises and falls across light years. the result of forgotten collisions, or invisible gravities stretching this ancient cosmic sea into soft, undulating folds of time and silence. The interior lighting of the ship dims once more, mimicking the cool blue-gray glow that now filters in through the main viewport. And the effect is soothing. Like moonlight through fog, a constant faint shimmer that seems to soften even your thoughts. And as you settle deeper into the seat, wrapped in warmth and silence, the world inside and the world outside blur into one single current. Your breath becoming the tide, your heart the slow rhythm of this boundless drift. Occasionally, shapes emerge in the haze, larger formations that could be old debris or natural satellites sculpted by time and exposure. Their surfaces smooth and cratered, some drifting alone, others trailing long, ghostly wakes of dust that curve away into the dark like soft fabric trailing behind a dancer. One such form rotates slowly nearby, an oval-shaped mass of stone and metal pitted with age, its surface covered in faint iridescence, where layers of minerals have reacted over countless centuries with solar wind and stardust. And as the ship passes close, you can almost imagine it breathing. Not with life, but with memory, with the slow patience of matter that has existed far longer than any voice that might name it. You watch it turn, each rotation taking minutes, and as you do, another shape becomes visible far beyond it. A vast spiral of drifting gas, not unlike a galaxy but smaller, more personal, as though some ancient celestial current spun itself briefly into a pattern of slow dance before relaxing back into the open dark, and the ship adjusts course to coast through one of its outer arms. The gas here is faintly luminous, tinged with hints of rose and violet, swirling in slow motion as if stirred by invisible fingers, and as you pass through it, light patterns ripple across the windows, stretching and folding like reflections on moving water. The sensors hum softly but offer no warning. There is no danger here, only beauty, only the infinite, soft play of motion without urgency. You feel it now in your muscles, your chest, the back of your mind, the sheer gentleness of this region, the way everything moves with such care, as though afraid to disturb your presence. You are not just an observer here, you are part of it. Another pattern woven into the vast blanket of motion and quiet light. The spiral fades behind you, its shape dissolving into the folds of the pale tides once more, and the next stretch of your path is wide and open. A corridor of slightly clearer space framed on both sides by drifting curtains of ionized dust that glow faintly with residual energy, like the afterimage of lightning caught in a long exposure photograph. These walls seem to breathe as well, their outer edges pulsing ever so gently as the electromagnetic fields sway, and the ship passes between them as through a gateway not built but grown. Beyond it, the pale tides deepen in color, the faint bluish hues giving way to silver, then into a soft lavender gray that reflects across the hull like morning shadows across quiet stone. There is no noise, only the hush of the ship and the soft echo of your breath, and the view outside becomes a kind of dream, filled with arcs and lines of motion that shift so slowly you could spend days watching them only to realize they've moved only slightly. And yet there is no impatience, because the passage of time here is part of the piece. The slower it moves, the more space opens within it, the more stillness you find. Eventually, the ship begins to curve downward through the tidal layers, not sharply but with a long, gentle dip that takes you deeper into the heart of the formation. And in this region the light changes once again, becoming warmer, touched with soft gold and amber tones, as though the currents here are closer to the remnants of ancient stars, their dying breaths suspended in long, arcing waves of energy that now cradle your vessel like the hands of some vast, unseen presence. You close your eyes for a time, not from sleep but from softness, letting the glow warm your face, and even without sight you feel the shape of the world around you, the tides folding and unfolding, the magnetic swells expanding and retracting, the silence singing without sound. When you open your eyes again, you've entered a kind of basin within the pale tides, a low pocket where the dust pools in soft eddies, forming shapes like dunes beneath a celestial breeze. The ship floats quietly above them, casting a faint shadow over a slow, rotating spiral below, a whirlpool made not of water, but of light and silence. You drift there for a long time, letting the view fill you, and something about this place feels final, not like an ending, but like a pause, so complete it exists outside of sequence, a place between one breath and the next, held forever in the present. And just as softly, the ship begins to lift again, rising from the basin, slowly ascending along a winding path traced by faint gravitational waves, like climbing an invisible staircase made of light. The color of the surrounding dust begins to thin, the hues becoming brighter again, pale blue returning, then silver, then finally fading toward clear as the pale tides begin to dissolve behind you. You are emerging from the sea now, your vessel gliding once more into open starlight, the currents falling away beneath you. And what remains is stillness, open, vast, pure. Ahead, a single star glows brighter than the rest, small and white, pulsing gently with perfect regularity. Your course curves toward it without effort, and you follow its light, knowing that what lies beyond will not be louder or faster, only deeper, and the silence welcomes you forward once more. The pale tides recede behind you like the memory of a dream you were never meant to fully understand. Their soft glows and drifting spirals slowly dissolving into the endless velvet of space, leaving behind a deep sense of stillness that now seems to live inside your very breath. And ahead of you, clear and unwavering in the distance, pulses the soft white glow of the solitary star. Small, steady, rhythmic, a cosmic metronome guiding you forward with a calm certainty. And as your vessel continues its slow arc toward it, the stars around it seem to stretch thin, drawn like threads toward its subtle pull, not by force but by resonance, as if this star were not just a point of light but a tone, a song held in place since the earliest days of the galaxy. It is not large, not dazzling, not young. Its light is soft, silver-tinted with no sharpness to its edges. And as you approach, that glow grows richer rather than brighter, surrounding the ship in a luminous field that feels less like illumination and more like presence, gentle and reassuring, like the glow of a hearth seen through a window on a winter night. The star is surrounded by a curious structure, one that appears first as a faint haze before revealing itself as a concentric series of orbital rings, not solid, not artificial, but layers of harmonic fields, faint dust bands, and magnetic pulses slowly rotating in perfect alignment, each layer moving at its own tempo, like the nested gears of a celestial clock so vast and so slow that no single tick is ever heard. These rings do not obscure the star. They amplify its presence, carrying its rhythm outward through space in slow, pulsing waves. And as the ship enters their range, you begin to feel, not hear, not see, but feel a vibration. So subtle that it registers first in your breath, then in your chest, then in the way your thoughts begin to drift, not in lines, but in soft, spiraling circles. The ship's systems detect the frequency and adjust automatically, aligning the vessel's path with one of the rotational arcs, so that you glide smoothly along its current, carried like a leaf on the surface of a slow, moonlit river. You are not orbiting the star in the traditional sense. Rather, you are moving with it, through layers of resonance and slow time, each layer playing a tone too low to be heard yet deeply felt, as though the universe here has traded light for sound, and sound for feeling. The interior lights of your ship slowly shift into cooler hues, reflecting the soft silver and pale blue of the harmonic field outside, and inside you something loosens. A tension you didn't realize you carried begins to dissolve, not in sudden relief, but in a long, quiet exhale. The pulse of the star is not loud, not musical in any conventional way. but it is regular and endless. And as you settle into its rhythm, the ship no longer feels like a vessel traveling through space, but like an instrument, vibrating gently in harmony with the space around it. Your body is still, your breath flows evenly. The movement around you is so subtle, so slow, it feels like you are floating in place, suspended in a moment that neither begins nor ends. As the ship glides deeper into the inner rings, the structures become more defined, not solid objects, but layered bands of drifting particles that shimmer with energy, creating circular walls of translucent light through which the star glows softly at the center. These bands carry faint electric charges, low magnetic fields, and as you pass through them, they react gently to the ship's presence, vibrating with barely visible waves, as though acknowledging your motion with a quiet nod. Some of the particles within them reflect starlight in odd ways, creating the illusion of writing symbols or patterns that appear for seconds, then dissolve like whispers never meant to be heard aloud. Whether these are natural phenomena or echoes of forgotten messages encoded in the star's harmonics, you cannot say, and it doesn't matter. The meaning lies not in their interpretation but in their presence, in the gentle suggestion that even the quietest corners of space may still hum with intention. You drift through another band, this one slightly denser, and the frequency shifts just slightly enough for the sensors to register a new tone, a lower pulse that resonates through the ship's hull and into your chest. Not loud, not physical, but perceptible in the way your thoughts slow further, like the lull between one breath and the next. The ship circles now, not tightly, but in a wide spiral, drawing you closer to the heart of the harmonic star, where the density of these resonant fields grows strongest. Yet there is no pressure, no danger, no heat, only depth, only soundless tone. You find yourself moving deeper into stillness, not by stopping, but by aligning your mind, your vessel, your very sense of self, sliding into sync with the great, slow chord the star has been playing since long before Earth took shape. At the very center, the glow becomes something softer than light, something that rests not on the eye, but on the presence, and for a long moment, the ship holds position in perfect harmony, floating in place, with no spin, no sway, no vibration. And in that stillness, the pulse of the harmonic star washes over you like the gentlest tide. You do not think of time here. You do not wonder how long you have been in orbit, or how far you are from the nearest void. You simply exist, suspended in the deep well of this star's eternal tone, and it feels like a lullaby sung without sound, a story told without word. Eventually, without sound or command, the ship begins to drift outward again, slowly leaving the inner rings, and allowing the pulse to fade back into the background, not lost, just quieter, like a heartbeat remembered in the quiet after music ends. The outer rings shimmer once more, then dissolve into the starlight behind you, and the harmonic star grows smaller, returning to the sky as a soft, blinking point of silver. And you carry its rhythm with you now, embedded into your breath, etched into your thoughts like the last note of a song that never really ends. The head space opens again, wide, dark, and silent, and the ship turns gently toward it, its course quiet, unhurried, and certain. There are more layers to pass through, more regions where silence reveals its many voices, more corridors of drifting light and echoing stillness waiting for you just beyond the next veil of stars. The harmonic star fades behind you like the last light of evening slipping beneath the sea, not vanishing but folding quietly into memory. Its soft pulses still resonating faintly within your thoughts like the final echo of a song that never raised its voice. And now, as the ship moves onward into the vast openness ahead, the stars return in slow succession, their light distant but comforting, scattered across the infinite like calm embers floating above an endless shore. The space ahead is open, wide, and seemingly still, but even here, even in the quiet between systems, the universe continues to breathe. and you begin to notice a new quality in the way the light moves. There is reflection here, subtle at first, like the shimmer of moonlight caught on the surface of deep water. And as the ship glides further, this reflection grows more distinct until you begin to realize that you are entering a region known only in hushed observations and long-forgotten reports. As the mirror drift, it is not a place that many reach, nor one that appears on most maps, because it is not truly a destination. It is a phenomenon, an expanse of space where gravity, dust, and ancient radiation have conspired to form a kind of natural lens. A great slow field of curvature that bends light just enough to fold the sky back onto itself. And as your ship enters this region, the stars ahead do not vanish. They begin to repeat. At first you wonder if the navigation systems have glitched, if the patterns you see are a trick of tired eyes. But soon it becomes clear, you are watching reflections of light that has taken a longer path, light that has curved around the contours of this invisible drift, and returned from behind. And the result is a sky of echoes, a double dome of stars where familiar constellations shimmer twice, once from their origin, once from their echo, layered delicately upon one another. Like the reflection of a candle in still water, the ship adjusts its motion to compensate for the faint gravitational effects at the edges of the drift, its course becoming smoother, more gliding than ever before, as though it too feels the need to move more carefully here. Not from fear, but out of respect for the fragile balance of this strange place. You are surrounded now by light not only from the stars ahead, but from their ghost images trailing silently behind them. And the effect is mesmerizing, not disorienting, not confusing, but deeply calming, as though space itself has softened, as though the fabric of the universe has folded just enough to let you rest in its crease. The reflections are not harsh, not mirror-sharp. They are gentle and slightly blurred, like memories, like old dreams, like the echo of a face remembered through half-closed eyes. Even the glow of your own ship is reflected, faintly, in the dust fields that thread through the drift. And when you look closely, you can see the shimmer of your vessel's passage trailing behind you in the distance. Not in real time, but as a slow echo, a soft trail that seems to follow just a few seconds behind, delayed by the curvature of light and space. It is like watching your own journey from the outside, as though a second version of you drifts just behind, in silent reverence. And the feeling it evokes is not strange or uncanny, but quietly affirming. As though this place gently reminds you that everything leaves an imprint, and even the softest path through the stars leaves behind a glimmer. Time too seems to reflect here. You begin to notice that your own thoughts come more slowly, not in confusion but in serenity, as though each idea lingers a little longer before moving on, like ripples in a deep pond taking their time to reach the shore. The internal clocks of the ship continue their slow, precise movement, but you stop checking them, stop measuring, because here in the mirror drift, time stretches in both directions, not only forward but outward, backward, inward. And the only moment that truly matters is this one. The ship's path now brings it toward the center of the drift, where the reflections become most vivid, and for a time it feels as though you are inside a sphere of light, with no true direction, only gentle arcs of movement and layers of stars folding softly around you. In every direction you see echoes of starlight, and behind them the deep, endless black that cradles it all. You begin to feel not small, but deeply placed, set within this immense echoing universe with care, not lost in it, but nestled within its layers. As the vessel curves slowly along a wide arc, the reflected starlight, begins to shift in color. Some stars become tinged with soft violet, others with a bluish sheen, not from any change in the stars themselves, but from the way their light has traveled through the dust and curvature of this region, refracting just enough to tint the echo, like moonlight filtered through frost. It is beautiful, not dramatic or overwhelming, but subtle, elegant, and slow. And as you watch the colors ripple gently across the reflected sky, you feel something inside you respond, not with thought but with stillness. You've stopped expecting, stopped wondering what comes next, and have settled instead into the pure experience of what is each second unfolding like silk, each breath held in harmony with the drift. At the heart of the mirror drift, the light grows faintly denser, and here the ship pauses of its own accord, not stopping completely, but entering a slow, spiraling hover, its systems purring softly in harmony with the quiet around it. And outside the windows you see something new, shapes forming in the reflection, slow and vast. Not structures, not objects, but patterns in the dust and starlight, forming and reforming like music made visible. They move with a grace that feels conscious, though there is no source, no sign of machinery, only the endless balance of nature allowed to express itself in motion. These patterns expand, then fade, like breath on glass, and you feel as though you are witnessing a kind of natural art, created not for purpose, but for presence. A display that needs no audience to continue its slow unfolding across the silent canvas of space. You remain in that place for a long time, the ship turning slowly, so that every angle of the reflection may be seen. And with each rotation, the mirrored sky reveals something slightly different. Stars layered differently, colors blending more deeply, the ghostly echo of a faraway nebula shifting into view before dissolving again into the soft blurred edge of memory. There is no rush here, no sense of departure. The mirror drift is not a place to pass through, but a place to experience. A moment stretched wide enough to contain 1,000 peaceful hours. And then, as softly as it began, the reflections begin to thin, the curvature lessens, the echo stars grow faint, returning slowly to their places, and the fabric of space begins to smooth once again. The ship senses the change and begins to pull forward, its course gentle, rising slowly from the echo basin, and the mirrored world begins to dissolve behind you like mist at sunrise, leaving no trace but the feeling it imprinted upon your mind. The understanding that even in silence, the universe speaks, and even in the softest paths, light finds a way to linger. You emerge into open space once more, the stars returning to their familiar clarity, the reflections fading completely, and ahead, a distant glimmer begins to form, not sharp or bright, but pulsing gently, a new region calling in its own quiet time. The mirror drift falls behind, like a whispered story you will never need to retell, because you carry its softness now, woven into the rhythm of your breath, and the journey continues ever deeper, ever slower, ever more at peace. The mirror drift has faded like a dream, sliding gently back into the unconscious mind, leaving behind only a trace of its presence in the softened rhythm of your breath and the quiet glow within your thoughts. And now your vessel continues its drift through open, hushed space, surrounded once again by a deeper darkness that no longer feels like absence but like a presence of its own. Patient and listening. The stars are sparser here, fewer in number but more precise in their brilliance, like notes placed carefully on a sheet of silent music, and their light seems to hang in the air just a fraction longer than usual, as if reluctant to move on, and your ship glides among them without a sound, each moment passing like a smooth exhale. Ahead, something subtle begins to emerge, not suddenly but gradually. The way dawn leaks into the edges of night. A soft shimmer far off, a collection of faint, orderly glimmers arranged not randomly but in an unmistakable pattern, geometric and vast. It is not a station, not a city, not even a structure in the way you've known them before, but rather a phenomenon that seems to occupy space like a sculpture of light suspended across the dark. And as your ship approaches, the pattern resolves into something unmistakably intricate. A massive, almost invisible lattice made of fine energy filaments and floating points of reflective dust. Arranged across dozens of light years in a repeating, shifting grid that hums with quiet harmony. The lattice of light, as it is sometimes called by deep-range probes and poetic navigators, is not solid and not truly tangible. It is a convergence of slow cosmic forces, magnetic flows, old star trails, plasma residues, and gravity fields that have aligned by sheer cosmic coincidence into a semi-stable formation that rotates slowly through the void, like an ancient wind chime suspended in the breath of the galaxy. There is no force pulling you toward it, and yet your ship enters it as naturally as stepping into a still forest clearing. The path winding gently into the calm heart of something ancient and balanced. As you cross the outermost strand, you begin to see how the lattice holds itself together. Long, faint lines of energy tracing connections between points of illumination, most of them so delicate. They vanish if you don't look directly at them, but visible enough when the ship's lights dim to near nothing, letting the universe reveal itself without interference. The light within the lattice is not radiant, not bright. It pulses softly, like bioluminescence beneath deep water, flickering in slow intervals that seem almost communicative. Though no language is heard, no transmission felt, only the suggestion that this is a place of alignment. A web spun across space to hold stillness in place like a spider holds morning dew. Your ship begins to follow one of the lattice paths, not by command but by a natural pull, aligning its trajectory with the gentle gravitational lanes that flow along the structure. And as you travel deeper into its weave, the stars beyond become fainter, obscured slightly by the mesh of soft glows that now defines your surroundings. Within the lattice, time bends again, but not in a disorienting way. It becomes rounder, softer, the seconds stretching to accommodate the slowness of your drift, and every motion feels purposeful, as though the universe itself has paused to watch your passing. Each moment drawn out like the gentle stroke of a brush across. You begin to notice that the lattice is not uniform. In some places, the filaments are denser, tighter, woven into clusters of slow-turning loops and arcs, while in others they stretch wide, long lines drifting between anchor points that seem to pulse more strongly when observed. It is as if the entire structure is breathing in patterns you cannot quite decipher, and yet feel deeply connected to, as though your own thoughts and emotions are subtly resonating with the flow of this place. One such cluster lies ahead, and the ship naturally curves toward it, gliding slowly around a central node that glows a gentle amber color, brighter than the rest. Around it, the filaments twist and cross like the woven strands of a basket, creating a kind of open chamber in space, a room made of light and motion, where nothing is closed off and yet everything feels enclosed, protected, complete. You pass through its heart, and in that moment, everything becomes quieter still, as though the universe is holding its breath around you, waiting with perfect stillness. The ship stops turning. The hum becomes a whisper. The stars disappear completely behind the glowing weave. You are suspended in a cocoon of slow motion and light, not trapped but held. And for a long while there is nothing to do, nothing to process, only to exist within this pulse, this breath, this moment. Then, softly, the ship begins to move again, emerging from the chamber and following a slow incline along a curving filament, passing other clusters, smaller chambers, arcs of reflected particles and silvery dust, swaying like gauze in the airless void, catching the soft lattice light and bending it into faint rainbows that shimmer for a few seconds, and then dissolve back into transparency. You begin to sense the scale of the lattice now, not just as a formation of light, but as a vast flowing field that interacts with everything it touches, redirecting radiation, bending magnetic tides, coaxing passing comets into gentle arcs, guiding the paths of drifting asteroids, so they pass harmlessly between its lines. It is like a great peaceful shepherd of matter, never forcing, never halting, only suggesting movement, guiding chaos into quiet flow. You wonder how many centuries it has taken to form, how long this pattern has been dancing through space unseen. And the thought is not heavy, not overwhelming, but soft, like knowing the sea is deep and old and kind. The ship begins to approach the innermost region now, a kind of core where the lattice converges most tightly, a nexus of filaments and lights turning around a silent void at the center. Not a hole, not a mass, but a point of stillness where all motion slows to almost nothing. This is not a destination in the traditional sense. Nothing here is to be found, nothing to land on, no signal to receive. But still, the ship drifts toward it, slowing until the motion nearly ceases. The stars reduce to faint glimmers behind the weave, the pulse of the lattice so steady that it becomes the only rhythm left to feel. You are floating now, perfectly balanced, surrounded by lines of soft energy that stretch in every direction, each one a gentle thread humming with cosmic age. The silence is total, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of completion, of perfect alignment, of being precisely where you are meant to be. You remain there for a long time. No clocks matter, no measurements. You simply breathe, you simply are, and then gently the ship shifts again. Not in escape, not in haste, but in continuation, beginning its slow exit from the lattice, tracing a path outward that leads once again toward open space, where the filaments begin to thin, and the familiar stars begin to reappear, twinkling with clarity beyond the soft haze of the structures. As you pass beyond its reach, the lattice of light fades back into the void, its pattern dissolving into the distance like a lullaby trailing into the dark, and you carry its calm with you, not just in memory but in the softened beat of your heart and the quieted shape of your thought. Ahead lies more space, more stars, more silence, and you drift forward into it, with no need for anything but the journey itself. As your ship glides quietly beyond the edges of the lattice of light, the last faint strands of that radiant web dissolving slowly into the greater dark, you feel the shift not in any sudden way, but as a subtle change in the air around you, like the soft turn of a page in a book long read and deeply cherished. And ahead of you now lies a region that appears at first unremarkable. A vast openness devoid of major stars or brilliant clusters, no great spirals or glowing clouds, just an expanse of dim, silken black that seems to stretch endlessly without interruption. But the ship moves forward still, unbothered and unhurried, following a course that winds gently into the heart of this quiet zone. And as you travel deeper, you begin to notice the difference. This is not an empty region, but a transition, a haze of fine matter, faint light, and memory suspended between more defined regions of the galaxy. A space known in some ancient navigational texts as the drift veil. The haze between worlds, where light scatters, gravity softens, and the very fabric of time feels loosened from its usual hold. The change is not visual at first. It's in the feeling, in the gentle way your thoughts begin to stretch, the way your perception slows like footsteps quieting on soft ground. And then the visuals begin to shift as well, ever so slowly, the darkness becoming less dark, more textured, touched by glints of dust, so fine they seem like vapor, particles, drifting in no particular direction, shimmering faintly with the diluted light of distant stars refracted through layers of invisible gases and electrostatic fields. Your ship's hull absorbs the ambient energy without resistance, adjusting the internal systems to accommodate the gentle rise in ionic charge. But there is no threat here, no instability, only the hum of age of space that has not been disturbed for millennia, where no engines have burnt, no artificial signals echoed, and the only movement has been the slow, drifting exhale of the galaxy itself. Outside the windows, the view becomes increasingly abstract, as though the vessel is passing through layers of fog lit from within by dim memories, bands of color that barely exist, subtle washes of ochre, muted teal, soft lavender, all suspended in fields of near darkness that bloom briefly around you, before fading again into gentle obscurity. The sensation is not of motion through space, but of space flowing past you, as though you have become the still point through which everything else drifts. Occasionally a shape passes by, a long curve of mineral dust, trailing in a sinuous line like the tail of a forgotten comet, or a sphere of condensed gas that rolls slowly through the haze, catching the starlight and glowing faintly from within like a lantern in fog. These forms are slow, vast, and mostly silent, except for the occasional, almost imperceptible chime from the ship's sensors as it registers proximity or shifts its course by a fraction of a degree to flow more smoothly through the haze. There is no turbulence here, only the softest adjustments, like a leaf redirecting itself in a gentle current. The haze thickens slightly now, not into clouds, but into broader fields of suspended light, and the colors deepen in tone, more bronze now, more pewter, touched occasionally by threads of deep gold or muted indigo that pass like the faintest brushstrokes of pigment on velvet. The ship moves more slowly, not due to drag, but in alignment with the currents that flow through this part of the drift veil. And for a long while you simply float, watching as the universe transforms itself into a moving gallery of light and stillness, time unraveling softly like a ribbon slipping through your fingers. It is in this space that the mind quiets most fully. Not by force, but by invitation, and your thoughts become more fluid, less focused on direction and more on sensation, memory, emotion. The past and future blend gently, not in confusion but in peace, and you feel as though you are both entirely alone and entirely embraced. The vessel around you silent and warm, the stars distant but watchful, the haze around you like the folds of a great cosmic blanket drawn softly around your presence. The ship enters a wide corridor now, a natural parting in the haze where the dust grows thinner and the light bends more clearly. And here the stars return, dim but more visible, casting their soft glow into the veil, forming faint corridors of reflection that stretch across the open dark like beams from lanterns in distant valleys. You drift through this path slowly, letting the ambient light play across the hull, and it feels as though the ship is being gently carried through a dream of the cosmos, each movement matched by a deeper calm within. Eventually a new presence begins to form ahead, first as a faint density in the haze, then as a structure, vast, round and translucent, a kind of spherical field suspended in the mist. Not a planet, not a station, but a naturally formed bubble of magnetic and gravitational balance, holding within it a cloud of slow rotating particles and light that swirl in slow orbits like petals stirred by breath. As the ship approaches, it slows further, allowing you to observe, and the field welcomes you with a soft glow, opening a narrow corridor that permits entry without resistance. You glide inside. Within, the haze is muted, filtered, and the light becomes more defined, revealing the true depth of the field's contents. Arcs of luminous matter suspended in perfect symmetry, slow loops of ionized gas that orbit a central void, shapes forming and dissolving in a rhythm that seems to echo the deep breath of the universe itself. You hover there for a long while, Not to study, not to measure, but simply to be, to witness, to absorb. The colors are soft but layered, cool greens, faint rose, dim copper, all shifting like thoughts across the sky of a sleeping mind. The chamber is utterly quiet, and you realize slowly that this space has held itself together for millions of years, untouched by any hand or will. A cradle of slow harmony resting between worlds, asking nothing, offering only presence. When the ship eventually moves again, it does so as if reluctant to disturb the balance, gliding carefully back out into the broader haze where the veil thickens again briefly before beginning to thin at the edges. You are reaching the far side of the drift veil now, where the ambient energy fades and the light begins to sharpen, where the haze parts like curtains drawn slowly aside to reveal a deeper clarity ahead. The final stretch is almost silent, and you watch as the last shreds of mist trail across the windows, dissolving into the black like breath vanishing into the cold. And then, all at once but with no abruptness, you are beyond the veil. The stars bloom again, clear, crisp, and countless. They greet you like familiar faces, seen anew after a long journey through soft shadow. And you realize how much you carry with you now, how much peace has taken root in your chest, how deeply quiet the mind can become when it remembers that the universe in all its vastness can still hold silence like a gift. Ahead lies open space once more, and in the far distance, just barely visible, a single object begins to glow. Its shape unclear, its nature unknown, but its presence gentle, waiting still. Your vessel tilts toward it with the same softness that has carried you through the haze, and the journey continues, without hurry, without noise, with only calm and the endless hush of stars guiding you ever forward. Beyond the haze of the drift veil, the cosmos opens once again into clarity. But it is a gentle clarity, not sharp or bright, more like the quiet moment after a deep breath, when the world settles into stillness. And ahead of you now, growing slowly as the ship draws nearer, is the glow you saw before. Not a star and not a planet, but a solitary object resting in the open dark like a lantern set adrift across a nighttime sea. It is not emitting light in the way stars do, but rather reflecting it, softly and evenly, a steady glow that touches the surrounding space with the warm hues of polished metal and filtered starlight. And as your ship approaches, the object's form becomes clearer, smooth, round, and slowly rotating, like a pearl floating in the middle of nowhere. Its surface interrupted only by faint bands of detail, markings or structures, or simply variations in mineral content that give it the appearance of something crafted and yet entirely natural. The ship slows as if in instinctive respect, and the hum of systems adjusts once again to reflect the change in environment. The background radiation here is low, the stellar wind is calm, and gravity barely stirs. The air around the ship feels quieter somehow. Not just physically, but emotionally, like entering a sacred grove, where voices fall into whispers without needing to be told. This solitary beacon, as the logs refer to it, has no confirmed origin, no signature of artificial life, no trace of propulsion, no signal broadcast, and yet it is not inert. It is humming faintly, with potential, with presence, with a kind of waiting that has nothing to do with time. You drift slowly into its orbital range, and the ship matches its rotation almost automatically, creating a moment of suspension where you and the object are perfectly aligned, motionless in relation to one another. And in that moment, the silence deepens, so completely, it feels like a presence of its own, a dense, rich quiet that settles into your chest like a second heartbeat. The surface of the beacon reflects stars like a mirror made of dusk. The edges shimmer slightly, not in motion, but in as if the object isn't entirely solid, or perhaps isn't entirely present in the way other things are present. It appears more like a memory than a machine, more like something held in the mind of space itself. And for a long time, the ship does not move, nor do you want it to. There's something deeply soothing about being near it, as though this object has been placed or has drifted into this part of the cosmos for the sole purpose of being still, of marking a location not in physical space, but in the journey of the heart. And you let your mind settle into that sense of anchoring, letting the presence of the beacon slow your thoughts even further, until all movement is like breath, gentle, flowing, effortless. The sensors begin to hum very softly, not as an alarm, not even as a detection, but more as acknowledgement, registering faint shifts in electromagnetic alignment that change so slowly, they almost seem still, and the ship responds not by maneuvering, but by adjusting its internal resonance, matching frequencies as though joining in a shared silence, rather than a conversation. It becomes clear that the beacon, whatever it is not transmitting in any known form, but rather offering a kind of harmonic presence, like a stone in a pond, offering shape to the current, or a tuning fork, waiting to be struck. And the ship, in this moment of stillness, simply joins that presence, not to receive or extract, or translate, but simply to share. Time stretches again, not vanishing but dissolving into texture, and it is impossible to tell how long you hover there, perhaps minutes, perhaps hours, but the passage feels irrelevant, for the stillness holds you so completely that even the ticking of internal clocks fades into the background. The glow of the beacon remains steady, casting soft arcs of light across your viewing window, and within those arcs you begin to see something unexpected. Not words, not messages, but memories or perhaps echoes of places, images too faint to call visions, but too distinct to ignore. Shapes like shorelines, like clouds passing across mountain peaks, like the ripple of leaves beneath rain, and none of them belong to you, and yet they feel deeply familiar, not because you've lived them but because you've always carried the space to receive them. It's as if the beacon holds moments unspoken, untranslated, shared without instruction, and you do not need to understand them in language. You only need to feel them pass through you, one after another, slow and soft and infinite. These echoes are not urgent. They do not demand anything of you. They do not press or push or seek. They are offered like the gentle weight of a hand on the shoulder, like the warmth of a place remembered after years have gone by, and just as softly as they arrive, they begin to fade again, dissolving back into the glow of the beacon, leaving you more silent than before, more present, more aware of your own stillness as a living thing. The ship begins to turn now, slowly, quietly, tilting away from the beacon, not to leave it behind but to continue, and the beacon does not dim or react. It remains, glowing softly in the dark, patient and unchanging, as though it will continue reflecting peace into the void long after you have drifted beyond its reach. As you pull away, the stars return gradually, blinking back into full clarity, and the beacon shrinks into the distance, until it is once more just a point of steady light, indistinguishable from the others, except to you, for now you carry its stillness with you, etched into the rhythm of your breath, into the slow movement of your thoughts. The ship's systems ease into motion again, resuming the slow, unhurried drift through the openness ahead. And far in the distance, past the fields of darkness and scattered stars, a faint ripple appears, a shimmer, low and horizontal, like the surface of a faraway sea, catching starlight on its edges, and you feel the course subtly adjust again, guiding the ship toward it, not with urgency, not with command, but with the same kind of certainty that has brought you this far. You look ahead into the shimmer, and you understand without needing words that it is not the destination that matters. It never was, but the way you are carried forward, the way the silence unfolds around you, the way the universe offers its quiet spaces, not to hide in, but to be held by. And with the echo of the beacon still glowing faintly within your chest, you drift forward into the starlit hush, deeper into the endless gentle dark. The solitary beacon fades into the vastness like a held breath dissolving into night. And as the ship continues its soft trajectory, the shimmer ahead begins to take on form, no longer just a glint in the distance, but a widening field of reflected light, that stretches flat across the void like a polished sheet of silver glass suspended between the stars. Not a solid surface, but something more ephemeral, more delicate. A thin, luminous layer formed by countless particles arranged by time and gravity into a horizontal drift that spans a region of open space, like the surface of a silent celestial sea. And as your ship glides toward it, the light begins to shift, not growing brighter but more present, more involved, as if the shimmer responds gently to your approach, adjusting the way it catches and returns the light of distant stars, forming long, slow bands of soft reflection that move like waves beneath you. Even though nothing stirs, the sensors recognize it now as a rare structure referred to only in scattered data archives as the shimmering plane, a naturally occurring layer of ice crystal filaments and trace plasma, held together by a field of balanced forces, so subtle they can barely be mapped. And yet it exists, perfectly horizontal, perfectly tranquil, spanning perhaps hundreds of kilometers or more, with a thickness so slight it barely casts a shadow, but its reflective properties are unmatched, making the space above it appear as if it floats above its own mirror. With your ship now drifting gently through the corridor between the real stars and their faintly swaying reflections. And in this corridor, something extraordinary begins to happen. The space around you flattens, not physically but perceptually, as the lights above and below align in such a way that your sense of up and down, near and far, begins to melt, not into confusion but into serenity, a dissolving of orientation that feels not disorienting but liberating, as though you've slipped free of gravity's habits and now exist simply in the present, a presence surrounded by light, surrounded by slow motion and shimmer, and your vessel responds by slowing to a crawl, not by necessity but by reverence, letting you drift at just the right speed to witness the plane's beauty unfold. Along the surface of the plane, ripples begin to form, not fast, not loud, but wide and slow-moving, like the pressure of your presence has created a gentle response, and the light that scatters through those ripples refracts into colors too soft to name, shades that live between violet and silver, between gold and cloud gray, tones that you feel more than see, that fill your chest with something like a memory you've never had. And as the ship continues forward, you begin to see structures forming along the plane, not buildings, not ruins, but natural arrangements of matter and light that resemble floating sculptures, long arcs of frozen gas that rise in perfect balance above the shimmering field before curving down again, creating bridges of glimmering frost that span the surface like walkways never meant to be crossed. And as you pass beneath one of these great arcs, its reflection joins perfectly with its form, creating the illusion of a circle so vast and slow-moving that it seems eternal, and the sense of scale vanishes again, replaced by a feeling of completeness, of infinite patience. Occasionally the ship passes above faint mists, rising from the plane, wisps of gas held aloft by gentle magnetism, curling into the space around you like incense smoke in a still room, carrying with them tiny flickers of starlight that pulse softly, almost rhythmically, like the slow heartbeat of the plane itself. And it becomes clear that this region is not still by accident, but is alive with motion so slow, so careful, so intentional that it becomes almost invisible, unless you match its pace. And your ship has done just that, easing itself into the rhythm of the place, like a breath settling into sleep. Within this deep calm, your thoughts stretch once again. Not out of focus, but into clarity, the kind that only arrives when all noise is gone. When the mind stops turning and simply observes, and you begin to see your journey not as a series of destinations, but as a single continuous moment, the ship, the stars, the drift veil behind you. The beacon now faint in your memory, all of it connected by the same thread of stillness, of movement, so smooth it might as well be stillness. And within that understanding, the shimmer below becomes not just a surface, but a message, a reminder that the universe, vast and cold and endless though it may seem, is also capable of arranging itself into beauty for no reason other than to be beautiful. The ship turns slightly now, banking gently to follow a subtle curvature in the plane, revealing more of its span as the shimmer begins to brighten. Not suddenly, Not sharply, but gradually, like the soft approach of dawn, and you realize that ahead lies the heart of the formation, a broad luminous region where the plane is at its thickest and its most vibrant, glowing softly from within. Not with heat, but with trapped starlight, and the slow interactions of tiny particles, and at the center of that glow floats something rare, something precious, a sphere perfectly still, suspended a few kilometers above the surface, glowing faintly with hues that change as you observe them. A phenomenon known only as the hallowed drop, a naturally suspended bubble of charged ice and trace gas, held in place by magnetic anomalies and balanced perfectly above the most reflective part of the plane, and the sight of it halts the ship entirely. Not by command, not by caution, but as if the ship itself recognizes that this is not a thing to pass by quickly. The sphere hangs there, unmoving, and yet within it slow swirls of vapor trace eternal spirals, never touching, never colliding, like thoughts circling peacefully in the mind of a sleeping dreamer. And the reflection of the drop in the plane below completes the image, forming what looks like an eye gazing upward into the void, wide and calm and infinite. You float there for a long time, the ship motionless except for its gentle alignment corrections, and during that time there is no need for movement, no need for sound, only the steady presence of the sphere, of the shimmer of the sky above and its reflection below, the boundaries between them lost completely. Then eventually, slowly, gently, the ship resumes its drift, moving past the hallowed drop without disturbing it, following the fading curve of the plane as it begins to narrow once again. And the shimmer dims not as an end, but as a soft withdrawal, like a whisper fading into silence, and soon you are surrounded once more by the vast openness of unshaped space. The stars clear again, the shimmer behind you now a memory etched in the softest corner of your mind. Ahead, the next destination begins to suggest itself, a cluster of faint lights arranged in no particular order, scattered across the dark like a painter's gentle touch upon canvas, and your ship, obedient to neither schedule nor goal, begins to steer toward it with the same unbreakable patience that has carried you across the stars, and you drift forward again, wrapped in the quiet peace of motion, of presence, of the cosmos unfolding exactly as it should. The shimmer of the plane has grown faint behind you, a fading memory of mirrored stars and suspended grace. And now your vessel floats once more through the great dark, the path ahead illuminated by a scattered collection of soft glows barely visible at first, but gradually resolving into a constellation of warm light, spread not across great distances but clustered in quiet intimacy like fireflies in the tall grass of an endless field. And as you drift closer, you begin to understand that this region, this space of slow and clustered radiance, is something rare, something not often witnessed even by those who spend lifetimes traversing the galaxy. For it is not merely a collection of stars or a nebulous glow. It is a living geometry, a naturally forming configuration known in only the oldest navigational whispers as the starlit orchard, a quiet grove of slowly burning stars, old and small, gathered in a stable mutual balance so delicate and serene that their combined gravity forms a kind of open sanctuary, a basin of calm amid the endless drift. And your ship now enters that basin, drawn not by force but by harmony, slipping through the invisible threshold and into a sea of warm, suspended light. The stars here are smaller than the great blue giants or blazing yellow beacons that command the busier reaches of space. They are cool, ancient embers glowing in shades of soft copper, muted rose, deep amber, and dusky gold. And they hang in the dark like fruit upon invisible branches, perfectly still to the eye, yet each one humming quietly with the slow song of fusion, continuing gently within. And the moment your ship crosses into their presence, something in the space around you changes, not in pressure, not in sound, but in atmosphere, as though the very idea of movement has been replaced with that of rest. And for long, long moments, the ship simply coasts, making no sound, following no command, its path bending subtly to the gentle tides of the orchard's gravity. And you watch in awe as the stars drift around you, some far, but all wrapped in the same sense of infinite patience. There are no sharp flares here, no bursts of light or flickers of instability. Every star burns with the slow certainty of age, their light carrying the softness of evening, of hearthfire, of stories told in whispers beneath quiet trees, and the space between them feels thick with time. Not heavy, not dense, but full of something unseen, something felt, as though every moment here has been stretched wide to allow for thought, for feeling, for quiet understanding. The ship adjusts course slowly, tilting toward one of the nearer stars, and as it glides in that direction, you pass between arcs of faint starlight that curve and crisscross like pathways between trunks in a grove long forgotten by time. And it is in this passing that you begin to see more than just stars drifting within the orchard are objects, not ships, not stations, but forms suspended gently in orbit, remnants perhaps of long-traveled vessels or drifting worlds, not broken or ruined, but resting, settled. Their surfaces smooth, their edges worn by time, and some are so still that they reflect the starlight around them in quiet patterns across the windows of your ship. One such object turns slowly as you pass, and its curved side glows faintly, revealing markings too faded to read and too symmetrical to be random. And you feel a sudden quiet reverence, as though you are passing by something sacred, not in the religious sense, but in the sense that this too has been here a long time, has drifted in peace, not abandoned but released, left to rest in the quiet among stars that ask nothing of it. The ship continues on, weaving now through a narrow channel between three softly burning stars, whose gravity has aligned to form a corridor of stillness. Then through that corridor the vessel moves like a boat drifting between moored lanterns, the shadows outside long and slow moving, the light touching the hull like falling leaves. And for a while you close your eyes, not to sleep, but to deepen your stillness, to feel the gentle gravity of the orchard settle into your bones, into your breath. And within that breath you hear not sound, but presence, as though the stars themselves are aware, not conscious but quietly attentive, like old guardians, who no longer speak but who still remember every footstep. Beyond the corridor the stars open wider again, and in the heart of the orchard lies its oldest ember, a white dwarf star barely the size of a planet, glowing with a soft brilliance like snow lit from within. And it rotates so slowly that its full turn takes longer than most years, and yet within that slow spin is a depth that speaks of unimaginable time, of cycles repeated not for purpose but for peace. And your ship enters a slow orbit around it, the arc gentle, the movement smooth, and for what feels like an entire night you simply watch it turn, the glow casting faint shadows within the ship that stretch and retract so slowly they feel like breath. And within that moment, held in the soft pull of the orchard's oldest star, you understand something unspoken, that the universe does not always move forward with speed and fire, that sometimes it curls into itself, finds quiet places to rest, forms patterns, not out of urgency but from patience. And in those places, in these orbits of silence, there is a different kind of time, one that does not measure but holds. The ship drifts again, pulling away from the dwarf star, rising gently along a spiraling path that passes once more between the glowing embers, each one slowly rotating, each one offering a soft echo of warmth through the dark. And as you move toward the orchard's edge, the stars grow slightly brighter, not from proximity but from contrast. As the great dark beyond begins to reclaim the space, the soft golden hues fading back into the deep blue-black of open void, and soon you are crossing the threshold again, emerging from the cradle of stars with no sound, no ceremony, just the steady hush of starlight retreating behind you, the memory of warmth lingering in the ship like the last notes of a lullaby. Ahead, the stars scatter once more into their natural disarray, and far in the distance, a pale arc stretches across your path, thin, elongated, almost transparent, a vast ellipse of drifting ice and dust known only as the halo loop. And your ship, bearing the calm of the orchard within it, tilts toward this new shape with a grace that requires no decision, and you move forward again, deeper into the gentle rhythm of the universe, further into the silence that asks nothing and offers everything. The stars of the orchard recede like lanterns in a fog, their soft light dissolving into the deep velvet of the void behind you. And ahead, arching delicately across the star field, like a silver thread left loose upon the dark, stretches the halo loop, a colossal elliptical structure, composed not of solid material or artificial design, but of fine icy dust, ancient fragments of long-forgotten comets, and the whisper-light trails of interstellar winds, shaped over eons into a perfect, sweeping arc that spans the silence like a curve of frozen breath. The ship approaches with the same serene certainty that has carried you across light years of gentle stillness, gliding ever forward without rush or hesitation. And as you draw closer to the edge of the loop, its presence becomes more distinct, not overwhelming, but undeniable, like the way moonlight shifts the shadows of trees at night, subtle and slow, but unmistakable once felt. The loop does not shine brightly. Its light is quiet, the result of countless crystalline particles catching the dim illumination of distant stars, scattering it like stardust across the curve of its orbit. And as your vessel slips into alignment with the loop's path, it's as though the entire universe leans in to listen. The ship's systems hum softly, syncing to the measured pulse of this region, where gravitational eddies guide the movement of the loop's contents, in a rhythm so long and slow that no individual grain could ever perceive it. And yet here, moving with it, your own motion begins to slow even further, not from drag or resistance, but from a mutual agreement with the space itself to honor its rhythm. The loop is wide, immeasurably so, and your path takes you along its inner edge, close enough to observe the drifting particles as they glide beside you. Tiny fragments of frozen water, bits of silicate, hints of organic carbon, ancient materials from the early days of stars, now floating together in perfect balance, their orbits weaving together like strands of thread caught in a soft breeze. As you watch them drift, something in you drifts too, your thoughts spreading out into the dark, not racing, not retreating, but expanding, becoming wider and quieter. And the sound within the ship fades to the background, replaced by an even deeper stillness, the kind that feels like floating in memory. The loop's arc curves so gently that it is almost imperceptible, a subtle bending of space that reveals itself only through time. And as the hours unfold, your course becomes a slow spiral, not tight, not looping back, but widening softly, as you glide through the luminous current, like a leaf caught in the outer swirl of a vast and invisible whirlpool. Occasionally, denser clusters of particles drift close, gatherings of ice crystals, moving as one, reflecting soft light in radiant halos, some shaped like long fans, others like ribbons, turning slowly in the starlight, as if performing a ballet known only to the deep. And your ship passes through them gently, their delicate glow brushing the hull in soft pulses, leaving no mark, only a moment of brightness that lingers in your eyes even after it fades. Further along the arc, the loop thickens, not with debris, but with shimmer, as though the light here has found a way to gather itself into something more substantial. And the space outside the windows begins to shift in tone, no longer simply black with scattered stars, but a canvas of shifting gradient, from dusky silver to pale lavender, to the faintest blush of rose. And the colors blend without boundaries, one easing into the next in a slow and endless gradient that seems to stretch beyond the limits of vision. Within this light, you notice the shapes of things not immediately visible, faint outlines, suggestions of structure, not artificial but formed by the long patience of the cosmos. Arches of denser matter, subtle waves in the flow of the loop's curve, perhaps the remnants of long disintegrated bodies that once passed this way and surrendered their mass to the peace of the arc. One such structure floats beside you now, a vast crescent of compacted dust and ice, turning slowly, reflecting the loop's glow in soft bands across its curve. And as the ship coasts alongside it, the reflection deepens, folding the interior cabin in colors so subtle they feel like dreams remembered in fragments. And for a long while you simply drift beside it, feeling not alone, not watched, but accompanied, your presence here acknowledged by the cosmos in its own language of reflection and motion. As you continue along the loop, a faint sound begins to emerge, not mechanical, not artificial, but born of interaction, a resonance created by the flow of charged particles, grazing the outer edges of the ship's hull, a whispering tone so low it feels more in your chest than your ears, and it comes and goes with the density of the loop's matter, swelling in soft waves, then falling away again, like the ocean drawing back from the shore. This resonance becomes your companion for the next stretch of the journey, a gentle presence that settles into the background of your awareness, aligning with your heartbeat, your breath, the rhythm of the ship, and through it all, the loop continues to turn, guiding you deeper into its arc. Eventually, you reach a region where the loop folds in upon itself, not into a knot, not into a tangle, but into a tighter bend, like the moment where a ribbon curves back toward its origin. And here, the light begins to swirl, the particles forming spirals within spirals, not chaotic, but elegant, like the petals of a flower turning slowly beneath the stars. In the center of this curve lies a hollow, a space where the particles thin and the light dims slightly, and the ship enters this hollow without hesitation, slowing further until it simply coasts, no propulsion needed. Held in place by the balanced forces of the loop's geometry, you float in this hollow, for what feels like hours, surrounded by the slow turning of light, by the gentle orbit of frozen dust and memory, and within this quiet space, you feel something deepen, not revelation, not knowledge, but a kind of understanding that exists without words, a recognition of your place within this endless stillness, a feeling that you too are a part of the loop, that your breath, your presence, your path is woven into the larger drift of stars and dust and light. When the ship finally begins to move again, it does so without sound, without command, simply resuming its alignment with the loop's outer arc, and you drift once more through the stream of glinting ice and mirrored motion, watching the spiral open into its final curve, the light fading from rose to silver, to pale blue, and then slowly back into the deeper dark of open space. The loop falls behind you now, still curving onward, its arc stretching beyond the limits of sight, and ahead lies a new region, not yet defined, not yet named, but touched at the edges by a faint golden hue, like sunlight brushing the rim of a cloud before dawn. The ship tilts toward it, the course shifting smoothly, and you follow, carrying the stillness of the loop with you, the quiet resonance still humming in your chest, the memory of light and arc and motion folded gently within your breath as the stars open wide once again, and invite you to continue. The ship approaches the 10th sphere now, and this one is larger, glowing deeper than the rest, and its pulse is longer, slower, as though it marks a turning point or a center, and your vessel gently reduces speed, not by command but as if responding to the gravity of the moment, and you pass alongside it, watching the swirling gas inside its boundary rotate, almost imperceptibly, like a storm seen from far above. And in that moment you feel something akin to being watched, not with eyes, not with presence, but with awareness. This sphere has existed here for so long, unchanging, undisturbed, that your presence within its proximity feels like an acknowledgement, and not just from you. The ship turns gently again, moving beyond it, and now the spheres begin to arc upward, the blue chain bending slowly like the limb of a great tree reaching out across the void, and the light shifts slightly, the blue giving way to faint teal and soft cyan, and the deeper you go the thinner the trail becomes, each sphere more distant than the last, and the silence around you becomes vast, not empty, but wide, as though you've entered the breath between the notes of a long, slow melody, and you pass the 11th, then the 12th, and the ship slows again, coasting now between the 13th and 14th. And in this space you see something new. A small drift of reflective material moving parallel to the chain, like a ribbon of mirror dust caught in a gravitational echo, and it shimmers softly, catching the glow of the nearby spheres and spreading it like liquid silver across the dark. Your ship moves alongside it for a time, the ribbon drifting with you, and for a few long minutes it feels like flying with a companion, not a being, not a vessel, but something equally still, equally graceful. And as the 14th sphere approaches, the ribbon curves away, following its own quiet path, and you feel a parting, not sad but complete. The 15th and 16th spheres are fainter now, smaller, as though the chain is dissolving into the background of space, returning its pearls to the dark. And after the 17th, the alignment begins to fray, not into chaos but into release, the spacing between the lights widening, the pulses fading, and you realize that you are nearing the end of the chain, not as a boundary but as a letting go, the way a dream ends not because it is over, but because it has finished what it came to do. The 18th and 19th lights are barely there now, more memory than presence, and the 20th does not appear at all. Or perhaps it is too far, or too faint, or has never existed except as an imagined step into the next passage, and your ship slows to a hover, pausing in the space where the path ends, or perhaps begins again elsewhere. And in the stillness, in the hush between movement and intention, you look back, and the trail of blue behind you is barely visible, a faint dotted line across the stars, like a trail of lanterns floating on a calm sea, fading into the mist of distance. As the last pale remnants of the blue chain drift into the quiet behind you, your vessel continues forward into a space that feels even more subdued than the path you've just traveled. And the shift is subtle but undeniable, like stepping from moonlight into a shadow that is neither cold nor dark, but simply softer, quieter, more complete. And this region, mapped by few, known by fewer, is referred to only as the silence fold, not because of the absence of sound which is ever present in the vacuum of space, but because of the way this particular corner of the galaxy seems to bend quietness inward, folding it over itself until all sensation becomes stillness, until the very shape of perception takes on the texture of rest, and your ship slows as it crosses the invisible boundary into the fold, not from instruction or control but from the natural rhythm of space itself. As if this region only allows movement at a certain pace, as if to pass too quickly would be to miss its meaning entirely. And so the vessel coasts gently, effortlessly, a feather drifting across satin, and the stars outside change. They do not dim or brighten. They do not shift positions, but they seem more distant somehow, not retreating but stretching, as though the space between things has expanded slightly, allowing more room for breath, for thought, for the suspension of all urgency. And the color of the void shifts too, only slightly, becoming deeper, as if tinted with the faintest hue of indigo or wine-dark velvet, something richer than black but softer than blue. And the ship glides on, wrapped in this color, this texture, this endless slow drift that feels like being held in the pause between heartbeats. Within the fold, the stars appear further apart, and the few that do shine are not clustered or radiant, but spread out in wide, solitary placements, like lanterns across a vast and sleeping field, and they burn with a gentler fire, some golden, others faint silver, some barely visible but still pulsing softly like distant embers under a bed of ash. And the ship passes between them without resistance, moving through an invisible network of gravity and light that seems to guide its path without force, like following the curve of a melody remembered from long ago. And around the vessel, the emptiness grows textured, not with objects or interference, but with presence, a kind of quiet that is not absence but fullness. And within this quiet you begin to feel something shifting inside yourself too. A subtle loosening of thoughts, a deepening of your awareness not outward but inward, as if this space is not only meant to be traveled through but to be felt, to be experienced as a mirror, held up to the drifting passenger. You pass a small formation now, not a planet or a station or even an asteroid, but a collection of slow-moving particulate matter, arranged in a natural spiral, gently turning without breaking its shape. And as the ship passes near it, the particles scatter light into delicate arcs that trace the hull in silence. And then they fall away again, continuing their long, slow orbit around an invisible center. And you realize that these quiet structures, these dust spiral, these motionless clouds are scattered throughout the fold like unspoken phrases, like punctuation in the long sentence of the stars. There is no sign of past travelers here, no lingering signals or forgotten probe, and the ship detects no anomalies beyond the incredibly low temperature and the unique density of matter in the region. But it all adds up to something that cannot be measured, an emotional geometry, a still architecture, a sensation that you are inside something vast and sacred, something that was not built but has always been, not for you or anyone else, but existing simply because the universe makes space for calm as surely as it makes space for fire. The journey continues deeper, and the fold begins to reveal more layers, not through contrast but through nuance, like discovering a new rhythm in the silence, a deeper hum beneath the quiet. And the stars grow slightly more vivid now, not closer but clearer, as though the distance has folded in on itself. And within that clarity you spot a phenomenon unlike anything encountered before on this voyage. A region of light that is not bright but concentrated, like a soft pearl suspended in the distance, unmoving, not flashing, not expanding, just glowing with a consistent presence. And as the ship moves closer, it becomes clear that this light is not a source, but a concentration, the slow gathering of photons and radiation from hundreds of stars refracted through dust and gas that the eye cannot see, and it has collected here in this moment of space, like dew in the petals of a sleeping flower, and the ship passes through its edge without resistance, entering a field of faintly glowing mist that is invisible until light touches it. And when that light does touch, it glows pale gold, pale green, pale violet, shifting in hue depending on how you look, depending on your angle, like oil upon still water. And the colors move around you now, quiet and slow, sliding across the windows in gentle sweeps. And the light finds its way into the ship too, filling the air with something softer than brightness, something that rests on the skin like warmth remembered. And in this moment, you feel as though you've stepped into a memory too large to belong to you. Something from the galaxy itself, old and undisturbed, now letting you pass through. The field continues for hours or longer. Time means very little now, and within it, you see more of those spiraling structures, more veils of drifting particles arranged by gravity, and quiet time into the shapes of waves, of crescent, of open rings that seem to turn only once every century or so. And the ship floats through these, never touching, never disturbing, and the internal hum of the systems grows so quiet that it blends entirely with the background of your own heartbeat, and stillness becomes complete. Eventually the field begins to fade, not abruptly, but in a long, gentle sigh, the colors retreating, the mist thinning, the light smoothing back into a more uniform dark, and once again the stars return. Clear, cold, but beautiful. And ahead of you now, in the middle distance, you spot the curve of something new, a crescent of reflected light turning so slowly it appears frozen, and the ship gently tilts toward it, responding not to urgency, but to invitation. And you realize the fold is not ending here, but opening into something deeper still, a space where perhaps even light has slowed to rest. But for now, the fold still cradles you, and your ship moves within it, like a thought too soft to speak, and you follow it further, knowing that each movement here is a continuation, a deepening of quiet, a layering of calm, and you carry it with you in your breath, in the still beat of your heart, as the silence folds around you once more. The fold stretches on behind you, wrapping itself slowly back into the fabric of the void, its soft weight lifting gently from the ship as though exhaling, as though releasing you into the next chamber of the galaxy's endless stillness. And now ahead, growing with every patient breath of your motion, is the gentle arc that drew your gaze from afar. A great, sweeping crescent of reflected light, suspended not upon a surface, but within space itself, like a sculpture balanced delicately in the dark. Neither static nor spinning, just drifting in slow perpetual balance. And as your ship nears this curve, you begin to see it for what it is. A natural phenomenon, formed from a thin, graceful field of particulate matter and microcrystalline ice, trapped within a band of stable gravity, illuminated from beyond by a distant, slanting star whose light spills across it, like moonlight across curved glass. And the result is something both real and impossible. A glowing arc in space that holds its shape like a frozen tide. And the closer you get, the more you see of its delicate structure, filaments trailing off its outer edges, clusters of bright reflection, where denser matter gathers like dew at the curve of a leaf, and the inner span, faintly translucent, glows with soft silvers and fading golds, folding the light inward until it seems as though the crescent is lit from within. Your ship approaches slowly, reverently, as though it too can feel the serenity emanating from this structure. And soon you pass beneath the outer edge of the arc, entering a zone of diffused light and softened gravity, where the pressure of your movement is absorbed entirely by the particles around you. And within this space, all sensation becomes weightless. The crescent veil, as it's known in a handful of long-distance logs, is not a place on any map, not a destination in any guide. It is a resting point, a pause in the vast story of starlight, and as you pass deeper into its embrace, the outside world dissolves into texture and glow. The veil is not thick but vast, and the light that filters through it is broken and scattered in ways that seem to change not only with position but with thought, with silence, with the rhythm of your breath. And the longer you drift, the more the boundaries of the veil shift and reshape, never closing, never directing, only surrounding you with graceful motion. And the ship slows once more, easing into the subtle gravity of the curve itself, following the natural pull of its arc. Inside, the light becomes more diffuse, and the particles outside become visible in great slow swirls, eddies of pale ice drifting together in layered spirals that move with such consistency. It feels like they've been tracing these paths for centuries, untouched by turbulence, held only by time and the balance of motion. You move through these spirals now, watching as the light dances across their surfaces, turning the cloud into a canopy of glittering mist, and the shadows they cast upon your ship are long and soft, each one moving with a grace that suggests music, though none is heard. It is within this part of the veil, surrounded by the arc's gentle pull, that you begin to feel the full depth of its stillness. Your thoughts slow even more, stretching out into long, unbroken impressions, and the concept of before and after begins to dissolve into simply now, this moment. This passage through silver haze, through the pulse of quiet light, and for a long time there is nothing to do, nothing to wonder, only to be. Occasionally faint shapes pass in the far distance, clusters of denser matter, perhaps remnants of old comets, or dust-bound ice drifting slowly through the structure, but they never come close, only orbit softly through their long, undisturbed paths, and within their turning is a kind of wisdom, a slowness, that teaches by demonstrating that some things are meant only to continue, to move without conclusion, without arrival. The ship enters a denser fold of light now, where the veil arches tighter and the gravitational pull draws you nearer to the heart of the arc, and the inner band begins to glow with a subtle golden hue, warmer than the pale reflections above, and in this place the particles move slower still, almost suspended, and you feel as though you are no longer traveling through space, but through memory, something not yours, but present nonetheless, a collective hush of every motion that's ever passed gently through this region, carried within the dust and the silence, whispered into the shape of the arc itself. The ship drifts for what may be hours, coasting effortlessly in the current, following a trail that doesn't exist in lines or signals, but in sensation, in the way the light seems to lean a little more in one direction, the way the particles part as you pass, and it is not a destination you are moving toward,
but a deepening and immersion. And eventually you find yourself at the very center of the veil, where the curvature is most complete. And here the light reaches its softest point, not dim, but diffused to such an extent that there are no shadows, no edges, only glow, only the impression of light without origin. In this core, the ship halts of its own accord, or perhaps the gravity holds it, and you are suspended in the quiet heart of the crescent. And around you the particles move so slowly, they appear still, frozen in motion, glowing faintly with the warmth of light captured days, years, centuries ago. And in this moment, the universe feels paused, as though taking a breath so deep and so long that it may never end. And you sit within that breath, weightless, thoughtless, complete. You remain there for a long time, embraced by not asleep but adrift in a peace so total that time ceases to matter. And eventually the ship turns again, slow as ever, beginning its slow withdrawal from the veil's center, rising gently along the opposite arc of the crescent. And as you ascend, the light begins to shift, growing cooler, blue. The particles outside beginning to stretch again into looser streams, and the curve of the veil begins to open back into the broader sky, the arc receding behind you like a dream you can still feel, but can no longer quite see. And soon the darkness returns, not with coldness or emptiness, but with clarity, stars reappearing through the mist like old friends, their presence sharp and welcome. And ahead, in the great expanse now opening before you, lies a single distant gleam, low and steady, pulsing once every long stretch of silence, like the slow blink of a lighthouse at the far edge of the sea. Your ship aligns toward it effortless, and the veil behind you fades into the folds of the dark, and the journey continues once again, not seeking, not fleeing, just moving gently forward through the waiting hush of space.
The arc of the crescent veil diminishes behind you, curving back into the fabric of the galaxy, with the same grace it offered in presence, now only a gentle shimmer at the edge of your awareness, not lost but transformed into memory. And ahead, steady and slow, the solitary gleam you saw before grows gradually more defined, not approaching quickly, but revealed in time, a rhythm made of patience rather than proximity. And as your ship follows the trajectory toward it, you begin to notice the quality of the surrounding space shift once more. Not through shape or color or contrast, but through tempo. The way a room seems quieter, not because it is silent, but because everything within it has settled. And now here too, among these stars, the movements are slower, the light more deliberate, and the pulse of that distant gleam more pronounced, blinking once every several long minutes, never hurrying, never faltering. The darkness around you becomes thicker in texture, not oppressive but absorbing, as though the void here carries more gravity in its silence, more substance in its stillness, and the stars begin to thin out gently, creating a corridor of emptiness that doesn't feel barren, but rather prepared, as if the light you are approaching has cleared space around itself for this encounter, making room for your presence in the same way a quiet voice makes room for listening. The ship adjusts nothing drastic, only minor shifts in its glide, a few calibrations that barely register on the console, and you drift closer now to the source of the beacon-like pulse, until at last, through the wide viewing pane, you see it fully, a glowing object suspended in open space, not a star, not a station, not a ship, but something in between, a radiant construct, formed from slow-turning rings of luminous material surrounding a dense core that pulses with a warm golden light, and this pulse spreads outward in a slow wave, dimming as it expands, until it fades into the dark like ripples in a pond too vast to contain. This structure, known in only a handful of archival fragments as the Lantern Pulse, has no known origin, no accompanying architecture, no signs of habitation or programming, and yet it persists here, unchanging, casting its measured signal out across the silence, not calling for response, but offering presence, a steady pulse that simply says, I am here. I am still. I remain. Your ship slows almost imperceptibly, coasting into the periphery of the lantern's glow, and you begin to see the intricacy of its form. 5 wide rings of translucent material, orbiting the central core at different angles, their paths slow and constant. And as the pulse flows outward from the core, each ring catches the light differently, scattering it into soft arcs that drift across space like brushstrokes made from gold dust. And as these arcs meet, they overlap in patterns that shift with each pulse, forming gentle loops and spirals of light that vanish and reform endlessly. And within this motion is something mesmerizing, a slow motion dance that draws the eye not because of its drama, but because of its absolute calm. The ship holds steady, floating in the lantern's field, and for a long time there is no motion, no thought, only observation, only breath. And you realize that what you are witnessing is not transmission, but ceremony. Not a signal meant to be received, but a cycle meant to be seen. A rhythm of light and silence, maintained for no audience, no outcome, just for the act of continuity itself. As the pulse continues, each one spreading out in the same slow radiance, you begin to notice its effect on the space around you. Not mechanical, not electromagnetic, but emotional, as if each wave of light carries with it a soft resonance that brushes against your thoughts and slows them further, lengthens your sense of time, smooths the edges of memory and future, until you are left with only now, this moment of stillness, this shared pause with something old and glowing and patient. The rings continue their slow motion, each one turning at a unique speed, their rotations out of sync yet never colliding, creating a shifting frame around the core that ensures no two pulses ever refract the same way. And the effect is endless variation within constant form, and it is deeply calming to watch, to witness a pattern that evolves without changing, to see movement without tension, light without heat. Your ship passes slowly around the lantern now, following a wide curve along the outer edges of its light field, and from this angle you can see more details. Tiny flecks within the rings that catch the light differently, perhaps mineral fragments, perhaps ancient dust captured in the orbit long ago, or perhaps artifacts left intentionally, pieces of something long gone now orbiting endlessly, unspoken and unnamed. There is no interference from the lantern, no change in its pulse, no reaction to your proximity, and you understand that it is not a sentinel, not a gate, not a device awaiting interaction. It is simply a presence, a place of balance and radiance, a lighthouse not for guidance, but for stillness, a glowing anchor in the vastness of space. As you complete the arc around it, the central core pulses again, and this time you feel it more deep, the light spilling across your view in slow rays that seem to reach not through space but through thought, as if the lantern is not sending a message but reminding you of one. A reminder not spoken in words but in rhythm, in repetition, in the quiet affirmation that even in silence, even in drift, even in the absence of destination, there is presence, there is light, there is peace. Slowly, without instruction, your ship begins to drift outward again, leaving the field of the lantern's glow, the pulsing light growing fainter behind you, but never entirely gone, the timing of its radiance still echoing in your sense of time, as though part of you continues to pulse with it, even as the next region of space opens before you, a stretch of starless dark so vast and so quiet that it feels like a true night, a place of rest not for the body but for the soul. And ahead, faintly visible on the other side of the void, lies a region marked only by texture, a soft halo of dust illuminated from behind by something distant, and your ship, steady as ever, adjusts its path toward it, carrying the echo of the lantern's pulse within you, folding the rhythm of its glow into the very fabric of your journey. You do not speak, you do not move, you only watch as the stars thin out once more, as the dark stretches wider, and as the ship slips into the hush that lies beyond the light. The glow of the lantern pulse recedes slowly behind you, dimming not into absence but into memory, into rhythm. Its quiet heartbeat still echoing faintly through the vessel's hum and the slow cadence of your breath. And now you are entering a place that holds no name on charts, no catalogued phenomena, no orbiting stars or navigational references. Only a broad expanse of near total darkness known simply to those who speak of it as the hollow between stars. A region of space where light thins and distances stretch, where even the sturdiest patterns of constellations fall away into faint echoes. The very fabric of the void seems to widen, not by force but by invitation, as though space itself is offering you more room to drift, to listen, to be. And as the ship crosses the invisible threshold into this hollow, a profound and perfect stillness settles over everything, not because there is less sound but because there is more space around the silence. And your vessel responds in kind, slowing to a gentle coast, its systems dimming further, its engines barely a whisper. And through the wide viewing pane ahead, the stars now appear so distant and scattered that they no longer feel like points of reference, but like distant thoughts, half remembered and drifting through sleep. And it becomes clear that you are now floating through a pause in the great structure of the galaxy. A space between breaths, where the spiral arms give way to nothingness, where stars grow sparse, where gravity weakens and leaves behind only the suggestion of direction. Here, even time seems to hesitate, stretched thin across the hollow, its usual cadence suspended in favor of something quieter, something deeper. And within this vastness your awareness slows further, your thoughts lengthening, softening, dissolving into the rhythm of the ship's motion, until you begin to feel not like a passenger, but like a part of the ship itself, like a point of calm carried through space, not toward anything but through everything. The dark around you is complete but not empty. Within it there is texture, the faintest suggestion of shape and motion, as though the fabric of space is thicker here, richer, like ink suspended in still water. And occasionally, a distant glint appears for only a moment. The reflection of unseen matter, perhaps a rogue comet, or the edge of some drifting dust cloud too faint to map, and then it vanishes again into the great hush. And each time it does, you feel the universe fold a little more inward. Closer, not with pressure, but with presence. There is no fear here, no loneliness, only the slow realization that this kind of quiet is rare, that the hollow is not barren but sacred, a place not of absence but of rest, where even the stars have chosen not to speak. Hours pass, or perhaps days, and the ship floats on without question, following no coordinates but the soft arc of momentum, carried gently by the inertial memory of every motion before this one. And around you the dark deepens, not in hue but in weight, in fullness, until it feels like you are wrapped in a blanket made not of shadow, but of time itself. The stars that remain visible through the windows are faint and far, some so distant that their light has traveled for eons to find you here, arriving not with brilliance but with humility, like distant voices too tired to speak loudly. And still your path continues forward, deeper into the hollow, and at some point impossible to say when you begin to notice the presence of something else. Not light, not motion, but rhythm. Not unlike the pulse of the lantern before, but softer still, less distinct. A background frequency that you don't hear but feel. A slow oscillation that touches the ship's hull with a faint, regular thrum. And the systems register no source, no origin point, only the steady presence of vibration, as if the space itself is breathing in cycles too vast to measure.
and in the stillness you match its breath with your own, allowing your senses to fall into its cadence. And once again you are reminded that the universe does not only move with velocity, it also rests. It also waits. As the ship drifts deeper still, you come upon the faintest shimmer of light ahead. Not a star, not a flare, but a band of soft glow that stretches horizontally across your path, like a veil made of dust and old photons. And as you enter it, the darkness softens slightly, not disappearing but acquiring a subtle sheen. And the particles around you begin to reflect light again, tiny motes appearing like silver specks in the void, drifting past in slow currents. And for a while the hollow becomes a sea, and you a vessel adrift upon it. The stars above distant and vague, the light around you diffuse and silvery, and within it you feel cradled, as though the galaxy has drawn you inward, held you gently in the palm of its hand. This shimmering veil stretches for some distance, and your ship follows its curve, drifting along its center as though pulled by the faintest gravitational wisp. And the light here begins to take on subtle color, pale gold, then soft lavender, then a cool bluish white that seems to hum faintly in your vision even when you close your eyes. And the rhythm remains, the pulse in the hull unchanged, a steady and low heartbeat in the silence. At one point the veil splits, not into two parts but into layers, each one folding over the next, and the ship slips between them like a thread passing through woven cloth. And the surrounding light begins to bend in ways that feel familiar, reminiscent of the mirror drift so many segments ago, but less reflective, more diffused, as though the space here is not showing you yourself, but wrapping you in its thought. And then gently the veil fades again, the silver motes thinning, the stars returning to their distant blinking places, and you emerge into the far side of the hollow, changed somehow, quieter, slower, your sense of movement now so attuned to the absence of noise that even the sound of your breath feels too loud. Ahead, something begins to form, not sharp or bright, but wide. A large, slow-spinning body that reflects almost no light at all. A dark mass suspended in space like a piece of shadow that forgot how to vanish. And your ship's path adjusts to bring you closer, not directly toward it, but into a wide orbit. And as you draw near, the structure reveals itself to be natural. A rogue moon or dwarf planet, cast off from some ancient system, long cooled, long forgotten. Its surface barren and smooth, broken only by a few deep ridges and impact scars. And you coast quietly above its equator, watching as the surface glides past beneath you, slow and featureless, but strangely comforting in its silence. A reminder that not all things in the galaxy shine, that some things exist only to drift, to endure. Your orbit completes in silence, and the ship begins to ascend once again, pulling away from the dark mass and back into open space. And now the hollow begins to thin, the blackness growing more transparent, the stars increasing in number, and in the far distance, faint but clear, a new formation glimmers, not bright, not large, but distinct, a gentle ring of starlight that seems to float unsupported in the void. And the ship, steady as ever, turns toward it, carrying you onward through the last breath of the hollow, into the next fold of space, with nothing but calm in your chest, and the rhythm of ancient silence still wrapped around your mind.
The hollow between stars recedes slowly behind you, its immense calm still echoing softly through the hull of your ship, like a fading heartbeat remembered more than heard. And now, ahead, the next form emerges with the same gentle inevitability as everything else in this journey. Not sudden, not sharp, simply revealed in time, as though space always intended for you to arrive here without hurry, without question, and you do, floating steadily toward a structure that at first appears as nothing more than a thin arc of light, a sliver of brightness suspended in the dark. But as distance dissolves and detail emerges, it becomes clear that this is no sliver, no trick of refracted starlight, but a ring, vast, glowing, slow turning, not artificial in construction, but perfectly shaped by forces unknown, a natural phenomenon so precise in its symmetry that it defies casual explanation, its presence neither overwhelming nor hidden, simply existing, balanced and waiting like a secret the universe never meant to keep, but simply left here for the quiet-hearted to discover. The Ring of Quiet Fire, as it has been called in a handful of poetic deep-range scans, does not burn in the usual sense. There are no flames, no heat, no radiation of danger, only a subtle shimmering warmth that pulses in long, soft waves cast from the countless micro-impacts and energy exchanges happening within its bounds. Tiny collisions between dust, ice, and charged particles, each one sparking a faint glow, and together forming a broad ribbon of silent light that wraps around a space devoid of a central map, a ring that orbits nothing, as if it exists for its own sake alone. The ship approaches with careful reverence, its systems shifting into passive observation, propulsion reduced to near zero, letting the vessel coast under its own slow inertia, and the ring begins to fill the viewing pane, widening until it stretches from edge to edge, a curved line of golden-white radiance that arcs above and below, so large it feels like the sky itself has been bent into a circle, and you float toward it, not aiming to pass through, not to cross it, but to follow its perimeter, to understand it through nearness and drift. As your vessel reaches the ring's edge, the light grows stronger, not brighter, but fuller, wrapping the ship in a soft glow that seems to radiate from nowhere in particular, a luminance that casts no shadows, only a gentle illumination that settles over every surface, and outside, through the windows, you see the structure's detail begin to unfold. Countless threads of matter moving in choreographed harmony, narrow streams of particles tracing perfect arcs along the ring's rotation, and between them, long gaps of near transparency that give the whole formation its shimmering effect, like a halo made of woven silk. Turning ever so slowly in the deep, your ship enters a parallel trajectory now, floating alongside the ring's inner edge, and for long hours it simply drifts, moving at the same speed as the particles outside, so that from within, everything seems still, as if you are flying in formation with light itself, and the view becomes hypnotic, a continuous ribbon of motion that does not spin, does not rush, only turns with such subtlety that it feels like time itself has curved. The ship's systems detect the presence of electromagnetic fields, faint but structured, as though the ring is maintained by natural forces too large or too old to detect directly. And within those fields, the particles drift according to their mass and charge, creating layers of movement that appear like threads in a tapestry, too vast to see all at once. And your ship remains within one of those layers now, hovering at a distance, just close enough to feel the hum of the ring's presence, just far enough to observe without disruption. Occasionally you see flashes of brighter light where streams collide, tiny bursts that bloom like stars being born, and then fade again into the soft equilibrium, and each one feels like a punctuation in the quiet sentence of the ring, a reminder that even in stillness, the universe is always composing. You drift there for a long while, the ship tracing a slow path along the ring's edge, and the longer you remain, the more your thoughts begin to mirror the rhythm of what you see, not ideas or questions, just long stretches of silent understanding, of being part of something not meant to be solved but simply felt. And in this state of mind, even your breath seems to match the pulse of the light outside, rising and falling with the faint undulation of brightness as it curves around the ring. Somewhere along the orbit you pass a thicker region where the density of matter is greater, and the light there becomes richer, almost golden, and your ship slows further, allowing the glow to fill the cabin, to wrap everything in a warmth that feels not physical but emotional,
like the memory of sunlight on closed eyes, and in that moment you feel a sense of place so complete, so whole, that time seems to stop moving entirely. No beacons sound, no scans interrupt. There is nothing here that asks anything of you. Nothing that directs or instructs, only the continued eternal movement of the ring, its slow fire turning in space like the heartbeat of a sleeping world. Eventually, your vessel reaches a gentle bend in the ring's trajectory, a place where the arc curves just enough to shift your perspective, revealing the full circular form once more. And now, for the first time, you see it all. One continuous loop of radiant matter, hundreds of kilometers wide, surrounding nothing, supported by balance alone. And in its center, the void feels even deeper, darker, a well of stillness framed by light, and something in you responds to that shape, to the idea of illumination surrounding emptiness, of movement defining stillness. And the ship drifts slowly outward, rising from the ring's inner orbit into a wider path, giving you one last view of its totality, before it begins to recede, the arc narrowing back into a curved line, then a sliver, then a distant thread of brightness coiled around the dark. And ahead of you now, the stars begin to return in full, brighter, sharper, more densely clustered, and at the heart of them, a vast field of shimmering motion opens like a slow bloom, a nebula perhaps, or a dust storm stretched across parsecs of silence. And your ship begins its slow tilt toward that blue, toward the soft call of colors waiting within. And behind you, the ring turns on, unchanged, endless, spinning its quiet fire into the deep.
The ring of quiet fire fades gently into the distance, becoming less a structure and more a memory, its soft rotating glow still etched into your senses even as its light thins into a fine golden line far behind. And now the stars ahead have multiplied in number and brightness, clustering like frost on a pane of midnight. And within that growing brilliance lies something broader, more expansive. A wide cloud of light and movement suspended across this sector of space like a celestial mural brushed softly across the void. And as your vessel approaches, drifting slowly on the inertia of everything before, the shape begins to reveal itself with increasing depth and color, not sharp or symmetrical, but wide and organic. Like a bloom opening in slow motion, vast and billowing. And this, now slowly enveloping the ship's horizon, is the region known only in rare observatory records as the Painted Bloom, a vast, ancient nebula composed not of chaos or starbirth, but of ultra-fine particulate matter, silicates, crystallized gases, magnetic dust, all drifting in a quiet equilibrium that allows light to refract and bend through it in hues too subtle and too layered to capture on any scan. And so its name persists not from classification but from witness. For those who pass through it return with only one word, painting, not of color and motion, but of stillness and infinite texture. Your ship drifts forward, the outer wisps of the bloom beginning to cross the windows, faint strands of pale silver and faded pink catching the distant starlight and diffusing it across the hull in soft feathery motions. And the deeper you glide, the richer the color becomes, not in bursts or brilliance but in saturation, as if space itself is steeping in pigment. The farther you go, and soon you are within it entirely, surrounded on all sides by the silent motion of colored dust, the stars now veiled behind long, slow waves of rose and violet, threads of icy green and blue drifting upward like sea foam in zero gravity. And the ship slows to almost no movement at all, allowing itself to be carried along the currents of this gentle sea. There is no turbulence here, no resistance, only the faintest push and pull of invisible tides, and your vessel moves like a single flake of ash through warm breath, every motion so fluid and unforced that you are no longer sure whether you are moving or being moved, and the thought ceases to matter, replaced by the way the light dances slowly across the inner walls, soft pools of shifting color spilling across the control panels,
over your hands along the inner curve of the window, and the silence here is deeper than before. Not more total, but more resonant, as if every grain of drifting dust carries within it the echo of its journey. The gravitational tremors of stars long collapsed, the faded hum of magnetic fields from systems no longer spinning, and you feel them not as sounds, not as thoughts, but as warmth, as calm, as the kind of peace that lives in old places where nothing has stirred for a long time. At the heart of the bloom, the density increases and the color grows more layered, not brighter but more dimensional, each movement revealing new undertones here. A shift from pale coral to dusk-hued, there a gradient from twilight gray into amber dust, and your ship glides through it like a brush pulled gently across canvas, trailing no wake, disturbing nothing, only becoming part of the painting itself. The bloom stretches farther than it first appeared, a field so wide it takes hours, perhaps more, to traverse, and as you pass deeper still, shapes begin to appear in the haze, not solid, not fixed, but formations of dust and color arranged by slow-moving vortices, like petals folded inward, and some structures are so large they span kilometers, arches of drifting material caught in ancient gyres, while others are small and delicate, swirls of color only visible when light hits them from just the right angle, and your ship passes through them silently, like a swimmer through coral shallow, and never once do the particles touch or press or rattle against the hull. They part with grace, flowing around you in slow spirals, closing behind you in patient curls, as if the bloom itself is aware of your passage and chooses to let you through. Time loses all shape here, not through confusion but through stillness, and at some point you realize you've stopped measuring distance, speed, even direction. There is only the movement of light, the turning of color, the breath of space curling through the bloom like wind through tall grass, and you are part of it now, not outside observing, but within, drifting through this slow, silent gallery of the galaxy's patience. And then within the deeper center of the bloom, something new begins to form. Not a light, not a structure, but a shift, a subtle brightening in the tone of the haze, a widening in the pattern of its flow. And soon you find yourself entering a cavern of sorts, a hollow within the cloud where the density drops away slightly, and the walls of dust recede to reveal a vast spherical chamber filled with light that seems to hover in place, unmoved, as though caught in a moment that has never ended. The ship enters the chamber with care, and at the center of it floats a single form, small, compact, glowing faintly with soft yellow light, surrounded by a halo of shimmering particles locked in slow orbit. And whatever it is older than any record you've carried, older than the paths that brought you here. Perhaps a core fragment from a collapsed star, or a remnant of matter that never coalesced, but within its glow is not power but peace, a warmth that is not heat but gravity of a different kind. And as your ship slows to a stop, floating now in perfect stillness within the heart of the chamber, the form pulses just once, a gentle flicker that sends a ripple through the halo, and the dust lights up like the embers of a fire stirred softly, and then it fades again, and everything returns to quiet. You remain there for a long time, suspended in that moment, the glow of the core casting long shadows across the inner walls of the ship, the colors outside swirling ever so slowly, and it becomes clear that this place is not meant to be solved or claimed. It is not a treasure, not a destination, but a sanctuary, a resting point in the long journey of light across space. And your presence here is not intrusion, but inclusion. Eventually the ship turns again, as gently as a falling leaf caught in the updraft, and you begin to drift outward, away from the chamber, through the layers of colored haze, through the petals and waves and spirals, and back into the thinner outer edges of the bloom, where the stars slowly return to clarity. And soon the color fades from the windows, the particles thin, and the void resumes its darker tone. But something has changed in the way you carry it. There is a softness now, not in your thoughts, but in the spaces between them. And as the bloom fades behind you, shrinking into a pastel wisp on the distant backdrop of space, you carry with you not its form, not its colors, but its quiet, the kind that lingers in the breath long after the final note of a lullaby has faded into night.
The painted bloom recedes into the distance behind you, its colors fading into a soft impression in the mind, like the afterimage of something beautiful that touched the soul more deeply than the eye. And now, as your vessel glides once again into the cooler clarity of open space, the stars seem to gather closer, clearer, crisper, as though welcoming you back into their quiet company after the long, dreamlike passage through color and dust and stillness. But even as their familiar points of light return, something lingers in the way they shine. A softness in their glint, a rhythm in their arrangement that wasn't there before. Or maybe was always there, only now seen through eyes that have spent long hours immersed in the silent language of drifting light. The ship moves forward without command, as if it too carries a new sense of knowing where to go, not by map or memory, but by a feeling drawn from the depths of the journey so far. And soon, ahead in the distance, a new region begins to unfold. Not sharp, not immediate, but slowly, with patience, as though it has been waiting for just this pace of approach. And at first, it appears simply as a faint brightening, a soft glow diffused across a long stretch of space. But as the ship draws nearer, the glow deepens and begins to take on texture, and you realize that you are approaching a field of scattered remnants, fragments of long collapsed stars, slow drifting shards of crystalline debris, particles of ancient matter caught in the gravitational lull of this quiet corridor. A place not of chaos or wreckage, but of gentle disassembly, where the light from broken things no longer rushes outward, but lingers, turns inward on itself and glows softly for no one but the silence. This is the drift of forgotten light, a wide and near motionless band of stellar remains spread across a deep trough in the galactic arm. Not dark, but filled with glimmers, pieces of shattered brightness that no longer belong to anything whole, and yet still shine softly, faithfully, without purpose or audience. And as the ship enters the field, the glow gathers around you like mist touched by stars, small points of pale light drifting past the windows in slow patterns. Their motion so delicate, it's hard to tell if they're moving or you are, and the effect is one of timelessness, as if you've stepped into a snow globe of frozen starlight, a place where nothing falls and nothing fades, only exists, suspended forever between stillness and drift. The debris here is not sharp or dangerous. Ages have worn down every edge, every surface smoothed by centuries of exposure to the slow tides of deep space. And the particles move not with momentum but with memory, held in motionless currents that seem shaped by the last breath of the forces that once bound them together. And your ship moves with them now, not as a visitor, but as another particle, another point of motion in the slow cascade of forgotten light. Occasionally, larger fragments pass in the distance, bent rings of broken moons, long arms of fractured satellites now turned to crystal by exposure, shells of extinct stations drifting slowly, their lights long gone but their forms graceful in the way that only time can sculpt. And each one seems to carry its own faint illumination, some from the lingering reflections of stars beyond, others from within, a soft internal glow perhaps, created by the slow decay of matter still holding on to the last traces of energy. And all of it together creates a field of quiet movement and soft radiance that feels like a lullaby made visible, an old melody drifting through the dark on light that no longer remembers where it began. Your ship drifts deeper, the density of the field increasing slightly, and the glow outside becomes more continuous, casting the cabin in a dim silver-blue light that shifts slowly as you move. And within this light there is a quiet that deepens your breath,
slows your thoughts, smooths the edges of your awareness, until everything within and around you feels like one long, gentle exhale. And the ship turns slowly now, tracing a wide arc through the drift, not avoiding any obstacle but adjusting to follow the contours of the current. And as you pass beneath a wide lattice of drifting crystal, perhaps once the inner frame of a long-lost vessel, you watch the glow refract and scatter across your windows, sending arcs of pale color sweeping gently across the controls. And in that moment, everything feels suspended. Time, motion, thought. Within the drift there is no noise, no chatter of systems or signals. Only the occasional soft hum of the ship adjusting its course or balancing its orientation. And even that feels like part of the silence, not against it. And you find yourself lost in the rhythm of the way the light pulses and sways, the way the fragments outside seem to pass by in waves, not like a current but like a memory retold slowly through motion. Some pieces carry markings unreadable, worn away, etched in languages long gone, but they don't speak of loss. They speak of patience, of time spent adrift without expectation. And you begin to see this place not as a graveyard, but as a resting ground, a place where once burning stars and once moving things have come to find peace, to give their remaining light to the slow hush of space. And now you are here not to take or fix or change, but simply to pass through, to witness, to carry the quiet. As the ship glides onward, the fragments begin to thin again, the fields stretching into sparser clusters, and beyond them, the stars return in clearer form, a wide band of sharp white light like the horizon seen from the surface of a moon. And your vessel rises toward it slowly, easing out of the drift with the same grace it entered, the last few particles sliding past like the end of a thought. And as you emerge into the broader field of star, the glow of the drift fades behind you, no longer visible but deeply felt, like the final notes of a song that lingers long after the air has gone still. Ahead, the space opens again into clarity, the dark stretching wide and smooth, and far in the distance, a faint curve begins to take shape, a ring perhaps or a wave, something large and slow and bright waiting at the edge of perception. And as your ship aligns its path, drifting always forward through the hush, you feel yourself still wrapped in the quiet of the drift, carrying its gentle light within you, breathing with the rhythm it gave you, and continuing onward, endlessly, peacefully, through the soft and silent dark.
The drift of forgotten light fades behind you like the end of a breath held in reverence, leaving behind not just memory but a rhythm, a softened sense of motion that now lives quietly within you. And ahead, the faint curve glimpsed at the edge of vision begins to resolve itself with graceful patience, revealing a wide arc of light stretched delicately across space, not in a perfect circle or line, but in a sweeping band that coils through the dark like a ribbon of silk drifting through water. And as your ship glides gently toward it, you begin to see that this isn't a solid structure or a single formation, but a layered current of energy and particulate matter winding through the void in long luminous threads. And this is the halo flow, a region uncharted by name but known by feeling, a celestial river that moves not with speed or turbulence, but with serene continuity, its motion too slow to see, but too constant to ignore. And as the vessel approaches the outer edge, the lights within the flow begin to shimmer softly across the viewing panes, casting narrow streams of silver, pale blue, and soft copper into the cabin. And you can feel the difference even before sensors report the shift, because the flow is not just a current of matter, it is a movement in space itself, a gradual bend in the gravity and time that wraps through this part of the galaxy, like a sigh drawn long and deep. And as your ship drifts gently into it, you are not so much crossing into a place as entering a state, a mode of passage, where everything stretches, breathes, and eases itself forward. The light here is unusual, less reflective, more reactive, as though each mote of drifting dust is made not of substance, but of memory, particles, charged faintly by long past stars, echoes of ancient events that now ripple through this corridor in silent formation. And as your ship aligns with the current, the propulsion systems ease into glide mode, surrendering movement to the flow itself. And you begin to travel not with thrust, but with participation, letting the vast, invisible tide carry you slowly onward. And the experience is one of profound quiet. Outside, the threads of the flow twist gently, converging and diverging, strands of glimmering material dancing like the northern lights across a midnight ocean. And each one seems to bend around your ship without touching it, acknowledging your presence but never resisting it. And inside, the light becomes more diffused, soaking into the walls and floor in soft, undulating hues that shift with time, a living atmosphere of reflection and glow that pulses with a slow, soothing cadence. And after a while you begin to feel that you're no longer watching the flow, but part of it, no longer steering but floating, part of the same rhythm as the current itself. The halo flow has no beginning and no end, no source or mouth, only motion, an eternal curve that drifts through multiple sectors, touching distant stars, passing old dead planets, brushing the edges of long-forgotten stations, whose lights blink no longer but whose forms still linger, like driftwood caught on the tide. And your ship passes one such relic now, a husk of something once traveled, once inhabited, its hull now wrapped in the silver tendrils of the flow, motionless yet moving with the current, and its presence does not feel abandoned but absorbed, like a note once played that now hums quietly within the deeper chord of the universe. You drift past it without sound, without curiosity, only acknowledgement, and the flow continues. Hours or days pass, it is impossible to tell, for time here flows like water through cupped hands, not counted but felt, and the light around you deepens in tone, the pale hues giving way to a warmer palette, gold and ember and soft plum, each color unfurling like the petals of a dusk-lit bloom. And within these colors you sense not just light, but history, not events, but emotion, as though the matter drifting around you carries impressions, not stored in language or image, but in atmosphere, and you feel them quietly as the ship continues, glimpses of something once joyful, once lost, once complete and always calm. And you understand that the flow is not merely a river of light, it is a river of what remains when all other things have fallen still. The ship encounters a pocket now, where the density of particles is greater, and for a brief span the view becomes more opaque, the outside resembling a soft fog lit from within, with shimmering highlights and long shadows curling gently across the hull, and the light seems to slow even further, refracting into long, elegant bands that stretch out and sway like streamers in windless air, and you pass through them with the same ease as before, untouched, unworried, and the hush within grows deeper. Within the flow there is no noise, no flickering systems, no urgent reports or markers, only the consistent softness of movement, the sense that you are wrapped in something older than systems and newer than time, and your awareness shifts again, not into sleep, but into stillness, that delicate border, where thought becomes feeling and observation becomes belonging. Occasionally, small clusters of debris drift past, rounded forms worn down by centuries of quiet movement, their surfaces etched with patterns made not by hand but by time and light and dust, and they glow faintly as they pass, turning slowly in the current, like offerings left behind in a river shrine. And again you feel that they are not here by accident, but by conclusion, the natural ending of journeys that needed no finality, only release. Your ship drifts along the flow for what feels like an entire evening stretched across weeks, and eventually the color begins to shift again, the golden hues softening into pearl gray, then cool ivory, then faint blue once more, and ahead the current begins to widen, the thread spreading out into looser formations, the shimmer fading, the flow gradually dissolving into broader space, and soon you are emerging from its grasp, your ship gently resuming its own momentum, and the hush lingers a moment longer, like the final touch of a warm breeze before it slips away into stillness, and the halo flow vanishes behind you, folding back into the starlit void,
as though it had never been separate, and ahead, a new region waits, darker, smoother, with only a faint glint in the far distance, and the ship turns toward it quietly, drifting on through the silence that carries you still.
As the last shimmer of the halo flow fades behind you, curling into the vast black like a faint afterglow at the edge of sleep, the stars ahead begin to spread wider, not in number, but in placement, each one seated farther from the next, as if giving each other the dignity of distance. And in that space, darkness settles more completely. Not oppressive, not cold, but deeper, thicker, more complete, as though you've passed into a place where even light prefers to rest quietly against the dark rather than push against it. The glow from your vessel is now the only constant source of radiance, dim and warm and trailing faintly behind you. As your ship enters a new region marked not by color or texture, but by the absence of both. This is the Obsidian Fold, a broad, slow-moving pocket of the galaxy where ancient matter has gathered and cooled. A region described only in the most obscure navigational archives, referred to in passing as a sleep fold. A quiet bend in the galaxy's spine where light travels more slowly through diffused particulate matter, and where gravity is just light enough to pull but never disturb. There is nothing jagged or abrupt about the fold. It receives you the way soft sand receives the sea at night, without reaction, without resistance. Your ship slips into it like thought into dream, and the darkness becomes absolute, not void, not empty, but whole. Black, not from lack, but from fullness. A saturation of night, so complete it hums faintly beneath your skin. Outside the windows there is little to see, not because nothing exists, but because everything here has given up its shine, content instead to simply be. And the shapes you do pass, drifting hunks of ancient rock, the faint silhouettes of frozen clouds, the slow-turning spines of debris, so old it no longer remembers the heat of stars, are revealed only by suggestion. The occasional flick of ambient light, catching an edge or curve before fading again. Time slows here. You feel it in your breath, in the long spaces between the quiet hums of the ship's inner systems, in the steady pull of your gaze across a view that never sharpens, and the further you drift, the more the fold wraps around you, not enclosing but expanding, stretching out in every direction like a great black tide, until the only motion is yours, and even that begins to feel like part of the stillness. The ship's engines are nearly silent now, reduced to maintaining only the smallest corrections, the hull responding to the gentle pull of currents unseen and unmeasured, and you become aware of your own presence within the vessel in a new way, no longer as an occupant or operator, but as part of it, your breathing aligned with its rhythm, your stillness in tune with its silence. For a long time, hours, maybe more, there is no change, only drift, only the slow passage of invisible forms in the dark. And the fold begins to feel not like a region of space, but like a mind, a state of consciousness suspended in dream. Moving through it are not intruding, not disturbing, but being remembered as if this place has seen you before in some other time or shape. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, the dark begins to thicken, not darker, but denser, a slight increase in texture just beyond the view, and ahead, a shape emerges. It is not lit, not glowing, but its outline breaks the continuity of black, with something even more quiet, a vast disk or sphere of unknown material suspended perfectly still in the heart of the fold. So deeply black, it seems to absorb even the suggestion of light. Your ship responds with instinctive caution, adjusting its trajectory to bring you into a slow orbit around the object. And as you move closer, details begin to form, not surface markings, but curvature, edges defined only by what they hide, a soft gravity that bends the field around it, not enough to pull, just enough to be felt. It is an ancient body, perhaps a collapsed station or a dormant observatory, maybe even the remains of a vessel, so deeply at rest, it has become part of the fold itself. You drift alongside it for a long while, tracing its perimeter at a respectful distance, and even though it gives no signal, no indication of life or movement,
It feels alive, not conscious, but aware, present, as if holding the memory of every drift that has passed it, every quiet ship that has brushed its shadow. The ship continues its orbit slowly, and the deeper you circle the object, the more it becomes part of the fold again, its edges dissolving into the black, until it disappears once more into formlessness, and the vessel begins to pull away, rising out of orbit with the same gentle grace it entered, and the darkness expands once more. Eventually the fold begins to lighten, not with stars but with shimmer, the faint suggestion of scattered light, returning, soft and distant, a signal that this region, this sleep fold, is ending, that you are nearing the next boundary of stillness. The ship tilts slightly, responding to subtle gravitational shifts, and ahead a new field begins to appear, a dust cloud suspended in starlight, thin but wide, a soft mist of radiant particles drifting in slow spirals, and at its center a steady beacon glows like a coal, held at the edge of breath. The fold releases you like a hand unclenching, and as your ship glides forward once more, carried toward the next slow mystery in the great river of the galaxy, you feel the weight of the darkness recede but not vanish. Hush now folded into you like a closing wing, and behind you, the obsidian fold remains, a deep black silence carved into the stars, holding still, waiting, unchanged. As the last edge of the obsidian fold melts into distance behind you, the darkness giving way to faint glimmers of returning light, the shape ahead begins to grow with a kind of silent grace, not coming into view with entrance or flare, but emerging gradually, the way dawn eases its way into the sky without disturbing the weight of night. What first appeared as a single point of light, dim and steady, now reveals itself as a glowing structure suspended in the middle of open space, not rotating rapidly or flaring with radiation, but pulsing gently, breathing in slow and rhythmic intervals that seem to echo the pace of your own heart. This is the breathing beacon, a place spoken of only in the most poetic corners of interstellar logs. Not because it is a mystery or danger, but because those who pass by it find little reason to explain it, only to describe how they felt in its presence. The beacon itself is not artificial in the sense of design or utility. It seems instead to have grown or formed naturally, a lattice of soft metallic minerals arranged in a spiraling oval frame, at the heart of which glows a warm core that expands and contracts with a cycle that feels too gentle to be mechanical. It does not transmit messages or coordinates. It does not emit warnings or data. It simply pulses, glow and fade, rise and settle, like a vast patient lung slowly exhaling light into the silence. Your ship slows its approach instinctively, systems easing into full passive drift, and you feel the shift before it finishes. The change in atmosphere, the way the light outside begins to tint the ship's interior with a gold-silver hue that doesn't flash, but glows from within. The way sound, though already quiet, seems to vanish entirely, not muffled, just unneeded. You drift closer until the beacon fills most of your forward view, and from this near distance its structure becomes more detailed, not in the sense of precision but in texture, long curving branches of alloy reaching out like frozen vines from the glowing core, each one trailing slow ribbons of dust or mist, caught in the weak gravity that surrounds the formation like a faint halo. Every piece seems to move with microscopic patience, rotating or flexing just slightly, as if stretching after an immeasurable stillness. And yet none of it disrupts the quiet. It moves the way fog shifts, the way shadows stretch when no one is watching. The ship stops entirely now, letting inertia and proximity settle it into place, just a few kilometers from the outer reach of the beacon's form. And within the stillness, you feel the slow rhythm of the pulsing light begin to line up with your breathing. Not by instruction or imitation, as though your body recognizes the pattern and gently adjusts to it, the way one might unconsciously match the pace of waves while standing at the edge of a silent shore. Each pulse swells outward from the core, the light not sharp but luminous, golden at its center, and fading into pearl white at its edges. And it passes through your ship, through you, through the cabin, without causing a single reaction from the systems, as though it has been made to move through everything without disruption, touching only thought. It continues pulse after pulse, one every few minutes, never louder, never faster. And as you watch, you realize that the light is not just expanding. It is carrying faint patterns within it, ripples or ridges that seem to shift their orientation subtly over time. And while you do not understand what they mean, they do not seem random. They feel like breathing, but not just in form. They feel like something breathing for you, around you. Like the galaxy itself has taken in a breath and now waits, holding you within its chest, not with weight, but with presence. Time slows again, not just from the environment but from within. You sit still, surrounded by the ship's quiet and the beacon's calm radiance, and you find yourself forgetting the passage of things, no longer counting pulses, no longer marking thoughts or memories or even sensations, just drifting, suspended in awareness that feels deeper than observation. The beacon, in all its silence, gives you nothing to do, nothing to decode or respond to, only the gift of watching something older than time continue its quiet cycle without interruption. And then, with no signal, no change in motion, you feel the ship begin to turn. Not to leave, not to hurry, but simply to shift its perspective, moving in a slow arc around the perimeter of the beacon's outer field, revealing its other side. And here, from this angle, you see that there are more branches than you first realized. More spirals and curves reaching outward from the center, and within a few of those spirals, caught in the graceful bend of their formation, drift small objects, smooth and oblong, like seeds or pods or stones, hovering gently in place. Not attached but not floating freely either. Held there by the soft embrace of gravity and light. They do not shine. They do not move, but their presence feels important, or at least intentional. Like offerings or memories placed where the pulses of the beacon can pass through them with every breath. The ship pauses here for a while, facing these objects, the glow of the core still pulsing behind them. And you watch them in silence, feeling the peace of their stillness reach out toward you, not asking, not telling, just resting in presence. You imagine that they have been there for a very long time, perhaps placed there by someone, or perhaps drawn naturally. Bits of drifting material that found their way into the beacon's orbit and were not released. Not repelled, only held gently and indefinitely. There is no story written here, no record to read, only suggestion. And that suggestion is simple. Rest is a form of being, not a pause from action, but an action of its own. Eventually the ship turns again, resuming its slow path around the beacon, drifting now past the opposite side, where the curvature of the structure breaks slightly, opening into a fan-like spread of filamentous tendrils that stretch farther into space, delicate, almost invisible against the stars. And between these strands, the pulses pass more freely, scattering into patterns that disappear before they can reach any edge. The ship follows one such strand outward, not far, just far enough to feel the gravity begin to fade. And then it stops again. Behind you, the beacon breathes unchanged, unaffected by your presence, its pulse continuing through the ship, through the distance, through space. You remain here for a while longer, watching one last swell of golden white light rise from its heart and spread outward, slower than before, or perhaps simply slower within you. And then gently, the ship begins to drift again, slowly pulling away from the glow, leaving the beacon behind in the calmest departure imaginable, as though carried not by engines or thrust, but by permission. The breathing beacon fades gradually, its shape dissolving back into distance. And though its pulses no longer reach you, their rhythm stays, gently echoing in the quiet of your breath, the weight of your thoughts, the softness of your awareness. And now, ahead in the darkness, a wide, dim field awaits, flecked with soft, blinking lights that mark the entrance to another calm place in the great sleep of the stars. And the ship, ever silent, tilts gently in that direction, and continues drifting on into the
with the breathing beacon slowly fading behind you, its final pulses dissolving gently into the widening dark. The ship enters a region of space that carries a different stillness, not heavier, not emptier, but resonant, as if the void itself has begun to hum with the faint memory of sounds long since past. The stars here are distant and low in number, each glowing with a soft, aged light that suggests not weakness but wisdom. Like the glimmer in the eyes of something that has seen everything and speaks only when silence isn't enough. You drift into this region without resistance, carried forward by the slow inertia of all that came before. And as the minutes pass, you begin to feel that the silence around you isn't empty at all, but full of something quieter than sound. A soft resonance that seems to move through the hull in slow waves. Not mechanical, not threatening, but natural, like standing in a cathedral long after the last note of the choir has faded. When all that remains is the breath of stone and the memory of music lingering between the walls. This is the field of lingering echoes. A name not recorded on most maps, but whispered through the notes of exploratory logs and anecdotal records. Each one trying to describe the same impossible thing. The way this part of space feels, as though it remembers. The ship glides onward, and gradually the visual texture of space begins to change. The emptiness becomes layered, not with objects but with shimmer, fine veils of dust that catch starlight just enough to form faint ribbons, curving across the dark like ancient ink strokes half vanished from time. And between those ribbons drift small, slow-moving shapes that could be nothing more than debris, or perhaps the hushed remnants of long-past craft or long-forgotten structures, worn smooth by centuries of undisturbed drift. Each one floats quietly through the field, silhouetted by the soft glint of dusted starlight, their motion barely perceptible, more a continuation than a journey. The ship does not need to navigate them. They move as you move, keeping their respectful distance, never obstructing, always flowing in slow, shared motion. Inside the vessel, everything is still. Even the systems, though running, have reduced their presence. The usual hums and soft flickers now dimmed, as if out of deference to the space you've entered. You are suspended not in sleep, but in something deeper, something slower than rest, something that draws your awareness gently inward, while still allowing you to observe the world outside. The resonance continues, a faint and subtle vibration, as though space itself is humming a note too low to hear, but not too low to feel. And after some time drifting in that quiet, you begin to perceive patterns in it. Not rhythms exactly, but waves like emotional tides that rise and fall without warning or urgency. And though they carry no decipherable meaning, they affect you nonetheless, settling something deeper than thought, quieting the parts of your mind that often stir without reason. Eventually, through the haze of shimmering dust, a slow-turning structure becomes visible in the middle distance, barely lit, almost mist, but unmistakably shaped by intention. It is not a beacon or a station, but something simpler, an array of discs suspended in silent rotation around a central hollow, almost like petals circling a single unseen core. Your ship adjusts course without direction, drifting gently toward it. And as you notice how each disc reflects the faint ambient light differently, their surfaces tuned not to brightness but to echo. Each one carved with subtle ridges and patterns that likely once served to capture or refract signals, though now they simply exist as part of the field's long memory. You pass alongside the array without interaction, without triggering any reaction. And in that passing, the resonance within the ship shifts slightly, as if one of the lingering echoes has recognized your presence, not as an intruder or even as a guest, but simply as another motion within the fold. You drift past the structure and continue into the deeper layers of the field, where the dust becomes thicker, not dense enough to impede motion,
but textured enough to tint the stars in softer shades, pale silver, deep mauve, the quiet orange of a sun seen through clouds. And in this softened view the horizon dissolves, until space no longer appears as distance, but as a fabric, stretched out and moving just slowly enough to feel. The deeper you drift, the more you sense the presence of what once was, not in forms or fragments but in sensation. It feels like entering the echo of a gathering long since dispersed, a place where voices once lingered and have not quite vanished, where songs were once sung and the last traces still hang in the air between dust motes. Your vessel slows further, nearly stopping, hovering among the shimmer as if waiting, and for a long time you simply float there, embraced by the hush. And the longer you remain, the more you feel part of the field, part of the drift, as though you too are becoming one of the lingering echo. Your breath another vibration carried gently through space, joining the quiet chorus of what remains. Eventually, the ship begins to move again, slow and light, like a boat released from its mooring, and you glide once more through the echoing dust, through the suspended light, through the field that neither ends nor begins, but simply fades into the next stretch of open dark. And ahead, the stars grow slightly clearer once more, and a pale glow begins to outline a curve, wide, smooth, delicate as a wave just before it breaks. And though you do not know its name, the feeling it gives you is familiar, as if it too carries the breath of 1,000 quiet memories. And as the ship gently turns to meet it, drifting onward without resistance, you feel no need to ask what comes next, only the quiet joy of continuing.
As the field of lingering echoes fades gently behind you, its shimmering veils of drifting resonance dissolving into the broader stillness of space, the next shape begins to reveal itself. With the slow unfolding that has come to define everything in this quiet voyage, not appearing suddenly but surfacing gradually from the black, first as a suggestion of motion, then as a subtle arc of illumination. A faint curve of light stretched out across the stars like a ribbon of dew catching the breath of dawn. Your ship draws toward it steadily, drawn not by gravity or force, but by alignment, as though its path was always meant to bend gently toward this new form. The light grows clearer as you approach, its texture unlike the dusted glow of the echoes or the shimmer of stellar debris, and you see now that the structure ahead is not solid in the way other regions have been. It is a band, a sweeping, curving sheet of matter so fine, so precise, that it appears transparent at first glance. But as your angle shifts and light catches on its surface, it shines with soft brilliance, a glint that dances across its curve like sun on the edge of still water. This is the curve of glasslight, a naturally forming phenomenon that drapes across this quiet corner of space like a frozen wave, formed of ultra-thin crystalline filaments, suspended in perfect tension between pockets of low gravity, their arrangement so delicate and uniform that light cannot pass through them without being split and slowed, softened and reshaped. And as your ship approaches the leading edge of the formation, the light outside begins to shift into long gradients, turning from sharp pinpoints of starlight into blurred trails of color that stretch gently across the viewing pane, like someone has taken a brush and drawn slow, translucent streaks of color over the universe itself. The ship reduces speed even further, drifting closer to the arc, and the glow that surrounds the structure is not radiant, but refractive. It does not shine outward but filters and bends what passes through it, turning every star behind it into a soft bloom of light, a haze of layered tones that seems to breathe with the rhythm of the ship's motion. You reach the outer edge of the curve and the vessel adjusts automatically, sliding alongside the band at a distance that allows for both observation and silence. And from here, the full scale of the formation becomes clearer. It stretches across thousands of kilometers, not in a perfect line but in a graceful, slow arch, rising and dipping gently like a windless banner. And within its structure are imperfections,
Not flaws, but subtle variations in thickness, in density, in the spacing of its filament, each one casting slightly different distortions in the light. And the result is a living canvas, a slow-changing panorama of curved reflection and shifting color that flows beside you as you move. The ship follows the arc for a long time, carried on a path that mirrors the gentle dip and rise of the formation. And outside the world appears as though viewed through glassy water, every star warped just slightly, their colors separated and smeared in delicate arcs that seem to sway even when you hold your gaze still. The effect is deeply calming, and soon you begin to feel that you are no longer observing the curve, but drifting within it, your vessel becoming part of its movement, part of its rhythm. At one point, a denser section comes into view, a knot of interlaced strands where the light breaks more dramatically, forming a swirling pattern like a frozen whirlpool. And as your ship passes it, the reflections shift briefly into something like a spiral galaxy, a mirrored echo of the shape your vessel has spent so long journeying through. And for a few long minutes, it feels like you are passing beside a memory of the universe itself. An image not captured but remade in glass and shadow. The ship slows further still, barely moving now, and the light outside softens into a slow pulse of color. Not regular, not rhythmic, but breathing in its own way, like waves brushing softly against the edge of sleep. Inside the vessel, everything is still. The air feels thicker with quiet, not heavy but complete, and you find yourself sitting in a silence so full it begins to echo your thoughts back to you with clarity, not with volume, but with space. The curve seems to hear your breath and return it in kind. And as time stretches into something wider than hours or minutes, you drift deeper into the moment, until the light becomes not something you watch, but something that surrounds you, folds through you, becoming as much a part of your inner quiet as the ship is part of space. Eventually, the arc begins to thin, the filaments widening, the refracted light less dense, and the stars begin to return to their sharper shapes, their true colors peeking through the veil of glass light. And the ship slowly turns away from the edge of the formation, leaving the last ribbons of curved illumination to trail across the hull like farewell gestures from light itself. Behind you, the curve fades into distance, no less graceful, no less immense, and ahead the dark opens once more, clear and wide, dotted with stars and crossed by nothing visible yet. But already the systems begin to sense another faint shift, a subtle variance in the surrounding energy fields, a signal that the next region is near, not a destination, but another chapter of the great hush, another layer of the galaxy's endless gentle unfolding. The ship turns slightly, responding with the same slow grace it has carried since the beginning, and you settle once more into the quiet, carrying with you the soft distortions of the curve, the memory of color slowed and reshaped by glass, and the feeling of being reflected in the calmest language space knows how to speak.
As the curve of glasslight recedes into the darkness behind you, its long arc dissolving into the black like a whisper, fading from memory. Your ship continues forward, drifting smoothly into a space that feels subtly different, not visually at first, but atmospherically. The sensors picking up the soft shift of faint magnetic patterns, stretched long and delicate like threads across this otherwise open quadrant of space. There is nothing sharp here, nothing loud or immediate, only the sensation that you have entered a region where energy moves more like breath than signal, where influence is drawn out across great distances, pulled thin until it hums quietly between the stars. This is known in passing as the thread of pale magnetism, not so much a structure or a field, but a path, a route traced by invisible forces that stretch across space like the barely there strands of a spider's web at dawn, catching nothing and holding everything at once. Your
ship begins to respond in minute ways, adjusting its orientation not to visual markers or gravitational bodies, but to the gentle tug of magnetic lines that drift like threads in a windless sea. And as you watch the displays and feel the subtle pull through the hull, you realize the ship is no longer simply traveling through this space. It is being aligned by it, its systems easing into resonance with the field, not out of necessity but because it feels more natural than resisting. Outside the window, the stars begin to look slightly different. Not because they have changed, but because the way their light bends through this magnetic thread causes the faintest distortion, like viewing them through soft, rippling air, and occasionally a shimmer crosses your field of vision. Not an object, not debris, but a gentle wave in the magnetic field itself, moving slowly across the ship's path, brushing past without force or friction, and leaving in its wake a quiet hum, like a thought passing just beneath awareness. As the ship continues, the magnetic threads grow slightly more structured, forming broad, slow curves that sweep through the sector in wide, invisible loops, and your vessel begins to follow these loops naturally, its path becoming a long, spiraling drift that feels more like orbiting an unseen shape than flying through space. And in that motion, there is comfort, as though the ship has found a path worn smooth by time. Within this spiral, the silence deepens again. You do not feel confined or adrift. You feel suspended, balanced within a pattern that needs nothing from you. A pattern that simply is, and as your ship glides through it, you begin to sense the way these threads intersect, how the long, looping curves occasionally cross and form nodes of soft resonance, points where the field swells slightly, creating what the archives have called lull points, places where the magnetic harmony is so precise it creates a kind of stillness that is deeper than any vacuum. And you pass through one now, slowly, the ship coasting into the center of the field's swell, and here the silence becomes more than absence. It becomes present, a soft pressure on the air, like the quiet inside a dome. And even the starlight seems to dim, not from shadow but from calm. You float there for a while, unmoored from time, the ship's motion reduced to a perfect hover, the displays dimmed by the hum of onboard systems having fallen into total harmony with the surrounding magnetism, and the result is an interior so quiet it begins to feel like a reflection of your own mind. No thought needed, no words arising, only the sensation of being, of drifting not forward but within. Eventually the field begins to shift again, fading as your momentum carries you slowly into the next curve of the magnetic spiral. And as you drift onward, the texture of space begins to thicken again, not with matter but with potential, a subtle rise in the field's density that causes the ship to tilt, to arc ever so slightly upward, following the long pull of another thread that loops above the current path, like a strand drawn in the air by an unseen hand, and the vessel follows without question, its systems quiet, its path steady. Outside, faint bands of light begin to form along the magnetic axis, glows that aren't emitted from any star but formed by the slow collision of fine particles, carried in the thread's current, and these glows stretch across the dark like veins of soft electricity, dim and constant, and the ship moves among them like a fish gliding through a bioluminescent tide. The bands weave around you, some passing close to the hull, others drifting far above or below, and in their presence you feel another layer of quiet settle in. Not a new silence but a quieter kind of calm, something that lives beneath the first layer, something deeper. As the hours pass, the spirals begin to widen, the curves of the field stretching into broader arcs, and your ship follows until eventually the field begins to soften, the lines of magnetism thinning, their pull becoming more diffused, less directive, and the vessel, sensing this, begins to steady its course, aligning itself once more with the broader drift of open space. The stars return to sharpness, the distortions easing, and ahead, far in the distance, a new shimmer begins to form. Something larger, something spread out across the horizon like a distant bloom just beginning to open, and the ship, silent and slow, begins to tilt gently in that direction. Behind you, the thread of pale magnetism stretches back into the dark, invisible now, but still present, woven into your sense of time, your rhythm, your breath, and as you move onward, you carry its quiet tension with you, the memory of a path, formed not by matter, but by the patient language of space itself. The last threads of pale magnetism trail behind your ship like gossamer filaments, unspooled into the dark. Ahead, the shimmer that had once been a faint blur on the distant horizon now reveals itself in full. An open expanse of softly illuminated space, unlike any other you've passed through. Not dense like a nebula or precise like a ring, but broad and gentle, a wide, slow-moving sea of light, stretched across the black, glowing faintly with a hue between silver and rose, like starlight reflected on the surface of calm water. Your ship enters this space with reverence, the engines barely breathing, and the atmosphere changes once more, not in temperature or pressure, but in tone, as though everything outside and everything within has grown still in honor of this final place. This is not a region with a name known in archives or routes marked on stellar maps, but something quieter and older, a place that feels like the far edge of the known, where travel turns to presence and motion becomes memory. The light here comes not from a single source, but from every direction, ambient and low, casting no shadows and forming no contrast, only clarity. Within it, everything softens, the sharpness of stars, the hum of instruments, the boundaries of thought. Outside, slow waves of faint luminosity roll across space, like ripples in a sleeping ocean. And as your ship drifts further into the center of this luminous quiet, you begin to realize that this space is not an ending, but a resting place. Not the conclusion of a journey, but the moment where it exhales and lays itself down. You let the ship coast to a full and complete stop. No alarms, no notification, just stillness. And in that stillness you find the kind of silence that doesn't just surround you but lives within you. The kind that expands with each breath until it becomes a part of you, and you a part of it. The light here doesn't move in rhythms or pulses. It glows in a way that suggests time has stopped keeping track of itself. And without that rhythm to guide you, you settle into a timelessness that feels like home. There are no signs of life here, no stations or signals, no markers or beacons. But you are not alone. The entire space feels gently aware, as if it remembers the passage of every ship that has ever crossed its threshold, not as numbers or coordinates, but as presence, as the quiet weight of breath in the dark. You remain still for a long while, minutes, hours, perhaps longer. And as you float in the cradle of this luminous sea, memories of the journey begin to rise, not as stories, not as images, but as feelings carried through light. You feel the hush of the shimmering plain again, the mirrored silence of the starlit orchard, the warmth of the golden reach, the deep quiet of the obsidian fold, the soft pulsing of the breathing beacon, and countless others moments where space whispered instead of shouted, where stillness held more meaning than movement. And you realize none of it was ever about distance or destination. The entire voyage was a lullaby written in starlight and silence, a path not from place to place, but from breath to breath. And now, here in this final place, where space has folded itself into soft light and long silence, you find the journey has not ended. It has simply become still. There is nothing more to do, nothing to solve, only the stillness beyond, waiting quietly, like the last thought before sleep, where the sky no longer asks and the stars no longer call. They are simply there, watching with kindness, letting you rest. You remain in this place, not as a traveler passing through, but as a part of the silence that holds it. And in this stillness, the galaxy continues its quiet song without you needing to follow it further. You've arrived at the place where the stars breathe slow,